They say it's one of the best sports experiences in the state. But I used to go.
They haven't pushed me down the stairs yet. they know there's not a lot of insurance money. No, we just redid our structure in the first floors. There's more running room. Of course, the floors are nice, refinished and slippery. So, my 3-year-old's smart enough to know that if Dad's running in a circle, you can stop and go back the other way to get him. So, to avoid a collision, I hit the dad. He laughed. I did not. He thought it was really funny. I was rolling around the ground in pain. Oh. At least I can laugh. They'll all be in flannels. No one else got the dress code. Day after a snowstorm? Well, I think I paid like 50 cents for this at the employee store a couple of years ago, so I win.
There you go. I had someone who works for me at Maine Health. She works some at Spear Hospital.
Yep.
So she came in with a few days before one Christmas and said, "Here's a pair of boots. Don't get my house in the ground because they're strong."
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Did you want a presentation? Did you?
That's my default. There you go.
The March 25th, 2024 special city council meeting will be called to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a single item under new business tonight, Resolve 020325-2024, authorizing the submission of the Community Resilience Partnership application and designating the city manager or his designee to be the primary point of contact to coordinate planning, implementation, and monitoring of energy and resilience projects. Those that were on the council last time will recall this item came up in 2021, so in effect this is a reauthorization. Is there a motion?
Motion to move.
Second.
Who was the second?
Yes. Yeah.
Moved by Councilor Walker, seconded by Councilor Whiting. Mr. Labonte, would you like to make comments about this?
Yeah, I can be brief. The info sheet and supporting materials did provide an outline for the public. There is a state program created a couple of years ago as a follow-on to Maine Won't Wait, the state's climate action plan called the Community Resilience Partnership. It's a framework for communities to evaluate their response and resilience to a number of factors, including extreme weather events, which our community is not immune to while we're not on the coast. I think we've seen with storms last summer and this winter, including the flooding in December, the impact there. So we went through an internal self-assessment, and that information was included in your packet, as well as a review of all of the strategies and action steps that are included in the state's plan, and which of those have already been completed internally at the city, are in progress, or there has not been work on. As part of a summary. We did hold a public meeting last week, and we had leaders from the various work groups of the Sustainability and Natural Resources Board attend. It was not as well attended as I might have hoped, but we had a good hour-plus conversation among those committee members about sort of where we go from here. Completing the self-assessment, enrolling in the program is really the first step on a longer journey. So the resolve before you follows on to the 2021 resolve that some of you may remember the council voting on. It also authorizes us to submit an initial action grant, which we're working on now, that we would submit this Friday in addition to our program application, which would advance installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure to the Auburn Public Library, which would both serve patrons and the neighborhood in that area, as well as Norway Savings Bank Arena, which is both a regional and national destination for tournaments and the like that would provide for charging for guests and visitors to that area of the community.
Thank you. Questions or discussion from the council? Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for all your hard work, Mr. Labonte. And now, the grant that you're applying for now sounds like a really worthwhile project. As time goes on and you follow that plan that you just handed us, will you be coming back to the council to update us on future things or projects you're starting or trying to get funds for? And in other words, once we say yes, go for it, you're not just going to take off running and we'll never hear anything that's happening again.
That would not be the case, no. That was actually a key point of discussion among the members of the Natural Resource Board around the capacity for the city to continue to coordinate. So the documents that you saw, while I may have compiled them, it was a compilation of work across departments: police, fire, public works, Auburn water, sewer, and there certainly is a bandwidth dynamic that goes to coordinating and gathering information. So I think that's probably something that the city manager, that Phil, will spend some time thinking about. All right, we've got this draft of action steps. How do we sustain that? And I think you could expect to hear more from Phil around how we coordinate that. What you see in that document doesn't commit the city to anything, and it doesn't pre-authorize any further actions. Those would be part of whether it's an updated comprehensive plan or other action steps would come back to you folks.
Thank you. That's very reassuring.
Other questions or discussion from the council? Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I think one thing would be helpful, Jonathan, I know you forwarded the story map to Councilor Platts. I think it was Councilor Platts. Can you forward that to the council? I think for the new councilors, I think it'll be a good story map was done regarding some initiatives that we had been working on as a city. I don't think, it might have some things that were actually in the future that we're also tackling. And but I think it'll be a good resource for you to be able to take a look at that and see what's been accomplished, what's being worked towards, and then how that aligns with, as Jonathan was just talking about, what's that plan moving forward. And that'll be something that'll be developed as we step into this a little further. So, because when we get to charging stations, one thing that we had never really worked on is that right now anybody in the public can come and use those charging stations. We're using, we were looking at it as funds that we were bringing in through, I don't think it was the hydro, I think it was another means to kind of offset those costs. And so we're using that. But at some point, as we start moving these throughout the city, we probably should come up with a policy on what does that look like? What would we charge to make sure that we're offsetting that? So we'll need to work on that policy as we move forward in the future. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Anything further from the council? Council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative, none in the negative, the motion is adopted. Is there any other business to come before the council? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment? Motion is adopted. We'll now move into our city council workshop for budget presentations, and our first presentation tonight is the police department.
So council, before the chief starts, you're getting your books. Just so you know, I gave Kelsey a last minute change at 4 o'clock. So that's always helpful, right? So, but it was important to make sure we got that document that you needed in your books for tonight. So, so some of you are getting your books back. Some of you had your books or we didn't find them. You're going to get some handouts that you can easily go through and eventually put them in. So So we'll give a moment for that to settle in before we get started. Hey, Jay, that will advance your slides. Thanks. All right, so if you want to jump to the packets where PD is located, if you want to follow along, you should have the PowerPoint presentation in there, then you'll also have the department's line item summary.
If you have your notebooks, it's the second blue tab. If you don't, it's in that stack somewhere.
Good? Yeah, if you have the handout, it's in the handouts. Yep. Okay. All right, Chief. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me. I will apologize in advance for my sniffles and my cough. I'm dealing with this chest cold that's been going around and throughout the city for the last month or so, so I'm trying to stay ahead of that. First off, we'll start with an overview of the department, and we have our organizational accounting of where everybody is. We currently have an authorized complement of 55 sworn officers, of which 3 positions are currently frozen, and we also have 6 civilians that work for us. We are divided up into 5 overall divisions with administration, patrol, criminal investigation, support services, and professional standards. And currently, if you look at the years for service breakdown that we've done, and it's important to note that the department is coming out of a historical staffing crisis that began in late 2022 throughout most of 2023. We have hired 14 new officers in the last 18 months, of which are 8 lateral transfers, or what we call lateral transfers officers from other departments have come into the agency. And that has placed a lot of responsibility on our supervisory staff because when you bring in that many new people, that creates a lot of supervisory challenges for us. But also that lends to the efforts of our recruitment team. We have a recruitment team made up of various staff that have come up with a recruitment strategy. They go out to job fairs, they go all across the state promoting the department and actively recruiting for the department. And overall, the recruitment team has been a great success. If you look at our Facebook page, you'll see the recruitment video that we did. We got some grant funding for that and had a professional video done that really highlights the strengths and assets of the department. And that's been a great gain for us as we navigate the recruitment crisis that is a nationwide problem for us. Now with that, the infograph here, 48% of our patrol division has under 6 years of service. We are a very young department right now. And with that brings, like I said, a lot of supervisory challenges for our supervisors to make sure that our officers are getting it right and making sure that they're weighing in effectively, making sure that the right decisions are being made and the right actions are being taken. And overall, 54% of our department has less than 12 years of service. So we are a very young department as we've rebuilt out of our staffing crisis. We're down to 3 vacancies, and I'm pleased to say that one of those vacancies will be filled here in another couple of weeks with a lateral officer from Texas. So that'll bring us two that we have two applicants that we will be sending to the August Criminal Justice Academy for the 18-week program. So we are slowly getting back to our staffing levels, and staff has done a magnificent job of maintaining that high excellence of delivery of service that our citizens have come to expect from us. A lot of 2023 was spent in minimum staffing numbers, where we had the bare minimums covering patrol in the city throughout. So it made policing tough for us, but our staff has done a fabulous job of navigating that crunch, coming out of it, maintaining a positive attitude, and we are coming out the other side of that. So with that, we invest heavily in training for our officers to ensure they're getting proper training to make up for those lack of years of service. What they're lacking in experience, we're trying to give them in training, so they have more training to make better decisions on the road. And if you look at our 2023 highlights, these are just kind of a breakdown of things that have been going on for us here in the city. And the next slide will show a 5-year average. But you can see in 2023, we had just over 25,000 calls for service in the city. And that runs about average over 5 years. 567 physical arrests. That's 567 people that went to jail in Auburn in 2023. And our officers do a great job of de-escalation, using verbal judo and communication skills to navigate those arrests. 6.3% of our physical arrests result in the use of force to bring that subject into custody. So out of the 567 physical arrests we had, 36 of those required some type of force to be used to gain compliance on the subject. Whereas 21% of our uses of force were taking people into protective custody through some type of mental health crisis. So we actually had more uses of force for protective custody issues than we did for actual physical arrests. So that shows that the mental health crisis continues to be something that we deal with on a daily basis. The onset of our PSY workers has helped reduce that somewhat. Right now, we're waiting for another PSY worker to be hired for that slot, but we've seen so far with the PSY program that's been very effective in helping us de-escalate people that are experiencing mental health crisis and getting them the resources they need for help. Overall, criminal summonses, traffic citations, traffic warnings. Our traffic warnings and citations are down from previous years, and that's based on staffing. Like I said, in most of 2023, we had a significant staffing crisis, and that hampered our traffic enforcement efforts. Our officers were going from call to call, and they were very call-driven and didn't have a chance to be proactive when it came to traffic enforcement due to the staffing levels. And then for our Part 1 crimes, these are just some of the crimes that our NIBRs and UCR numbers are based upon. And we had a clearance rate of 44%, where 44% of our crimes are being cleared by the officers. Overall, if you look at the 5-year average of everything for us, over a 5-year average, we have about 26,000 calls for service. So for 2023, we're about 1,000 under that. But if you look across the board for calls for service, we maintain pretty much overall the same amount of calls over 5 years. Physical arrests have been gaining over the last couple of years. In the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, our physical arrests were down just because of pandemic protocols, where we're trying to minimize contact with people. And that, since post-pandemic, those numbers are starting to climb again, where we're conducting more and more physical arrests. And overall, felony offenses have pretty much stayed the same over 5 years. These numbers really don't change a lot. In the last 18 years I've been in administration, these numbers don't fluctuate a whole lot for us. Our number of criminal summonses have dropped, along with traffic citations and traffic warnings for 2023. That's based on staffing. Like I said, we were at bare bones staffing. The officers were going from call to call to call, and they were doing a good job of just trying to maintain peace and protection in the city for us. So when you look at 23 versus the rest of them, that staffing crisis will help explain the decrease in some of those numbers. Our juvenile arrests are down also with a 5-year average. Domestic violence calls stay about the same, and we've seen a reduction in domestic violence arrests, and I think that goes to the partnerships that we have with Safe Voices and the proactive things we're doing there with our domestic violence safety checks to make sure that people are safe and they're safe from their offenders as well. And if you look at our 5-year crime average, you can see where most of these numbers are relatively stable throughout. We've seen a little bit of a drop in the thefts. We've been working with our retailers on establishing some thresholds for shoplifting to try to reduce some of those calls for service for us. And Walmart, Target, Kohl's, they've all been very, very good to deal with in trying to reduce the shoplifting that's going on. The district attorney's office has worked with us on a recidivism program where they're sending first-time offenders to an online class to help mitigate some of those theft issues. And in lieu of prosecution, they're using that to educate them, and we're seeing that that's having a positive effect on our thefts as well. Overall, our crime rate has been dropping for the last 5 years. With this in 2023, we're looking at about a 30% crime rate. There are 30 crimes per 1,000 residents, and that is fairly stable throughout this area. And in October, Department of Public Safety will put out their 2023 crime in review, where they will have all those numbers for the state, and there'll be comparisons throughout the rest of the state on what those numbers look like. And as you can see, where our clearance rate has dropped over the last 2 years significantly, and that is, again, due to staffing. Officers were doing the bare minimum to try to get their calls covered and getting things investigated and sent on to the district attorney's office for review and for prosecution. With our staffing numbers coming back, we'll look to see those statistics start to improve in this next year. Pardon my sniffles. The major budget drivers for us in the FY25 upcoming budget, we had some contractual increases that were not reflected in the FY24 budget. Prior to the FY24 budget going into effect, we had market adjustments that were done for salaries throughout the command unit and the patrol unit. These were market adjustments that were required to be made to keep us within the labor market, because cities were starting to realize that due to the staffing crisis, the recruitment crisis, they needed to increase the pay for officers across the board. So those increases were negotiated after the FY24 budget had been approved and before it was implemented. So the increases were made up, I believe, in salary reserve to cover some of those negotiated increases. So when coming forward with the FY25, now we're adjusting our salary line to meet what those contractual increases were. So there's an increase there. We will go through the additional positions as well. Three new positions, well, 1 new position and 2 sworn positions to be unfrozen in this budget. We are at the crux of overload for support staff, where we are requesting for an additional information assistant because the digital evidence management has really overloaded our resources, and we are falling behind because now we have to upload everything to the district attorney's cloud for digital evidence management. So the officers have to take their report, they have to take all their witness statements, any other additional pieces of paper that have to be included in the investigation, they have to scan those into a PDF and attach them in the case file in our records management system. And then from there, that file gets uploaded to the district attorney's cloud. Now, these officers have to spend time doing their own data entry because we don't have the support personnel to do that for them. So our officers are spending more time off the road scanning items to attach in our record file to be uploaded. And by adding a information assistant position to this reduces the number of hours the officers have to spend in the station. I am figuring that up to 60 hours a week, the officers will be back out on the road because this information assistant will be able to do all of that data entry for them. The officers can do their report, pack everything up, turn it in. That information assistant will then be able to upload everything, scan everything, get it to where it needs to be. Also, when you look at the number of videos that we are processing, body cameras and our in-car cameras are a great tool for us. They are very effective when it comes to prosecution. It's very effective for us as we train our officers. 99% of the officer complaints we get, we clear up by looking at the video. And 99.9% of the time, the officers are doing the right thing at the right time, and it's the perception of the person at the time that is off. And we'll bring them in, have them review the video, and they're like, yeah, I guess I didn't remember it quite that way. And we're able to move on. However, that takes a lot of behind-the-scenes resources because each video has to be downloaded from the camera, has to be classified as to what category of offense it belongs to, has to be assigned a number. Then that has to be transferred from us to the district attorney's office, which all takes time. And if you look in 2022, just over 4,000 videos processed. 2023, 3,700. That decreases again staffing, where we didn't have as many officers working on the road at that time. And as far as evidence processed, we are averaging almost 2,000 pieces of evidence annually that we're processing. And currently within our physical control here at the police station, we have over 12,000 pieces of evidence in our control. And our property and evidence coordinator, Becky Bixby, she does an amazing job with that. She has a system in place where we can go through, we do annual audits to ensure that everything's where it needs to be and everything's moving properly, and those audits come out spotless every time. So when you have one person managing 12,000 pieces of evidence, processing 4,000 videos, the videos are sometimes being missed, and we're having some discovery issues with the district attorney's office because and a video doesn't get properly classified, and it's deleted due to retention because it wasn't properly classified. So by adding an information assistant, that information assistant can assist with that digital evidence management to make sure that we are properly getting things categorized and we're not losing things in transition to the district attorney's office. We enjoy a great working relationship with our district attorney, and overall, we do a really great job. However, we do have things that get missed from time to time when it comes to the videos. And that's simply because our staff has been stretched way too thin when it comes to managing this type of evidence. And also looking to, out of the 3 current frozen positions, unfreeze one of the positions to have a detective that specializes in youth services. If you look down through our calls for service to our elementary schools, juvenile investigations takes a very unique skill set to be able to complete successfully. And what we're finding is we are finding more juveniles that are juvenile or youth victim-centered crimes, where our youth are becoming more victims of more crimes. And if you look over to the right where the DHS referrals are, every time that somebody reports child abuse, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, there's a mandated report that goes to the Department of Human Services. The Department of Human Services then makes a referral to us to notify us that this allegation has happened. That referral has to be followed up with by a detective to ensure, one, that if a crime was committed, then we are prosecuting it fully to the extent of the law. And by having a detective that was specialized in youth services, really focuses on our juveniles, works with the schools, on ensuring that our kids are safe, and they're getting the investigative skills they need to actively prosecute and investigate these juvenile-based crimes. And also, this youth detective would also serve as the juvenile court officer and coordinate all the paperwork between the Department of Corrections, juvenile probation, that's currently falls to the high school SRO. And this would allow us to parse out that paperwork and have a youth services detective that is fully committed to investigating youth-based crimes. And the second position to be unfrozen would be to complement our PACE unit. PACE stands for Proactive Community Enforcement. This is a unit that we just got off the ground finally at the beginning of March. This has been 18 months in the process, but staffing has finally allowed us to get PACE off the ground. We have a sergeant and a patrol officer assigned full-time to the unit. And this unit is focusing on neighborhood issues. It's not merely a drug investigation unit. This is a neighborhood enforcement unit where we are utilizing our data from our crime analyst to be data-driven. It allows us to drill into issues within a neighborhood, identify problems, mitigate those problems, stabilize the neighborhood, and move on to the next one. And for PACE, they also work on traffic enforcement as well. And since in this month of March, if you recall the Happy Days Diner drug arrest that we had, that was a result of PACE as they first got off the ground. And they've also been doing traffic enforcement details focusing on certain things, red light running, distracted driving, and they've issued 28 citations in the last 3 weeks just on those driving offenses alone. So as they get moving, they are going to be doing more directed, targeted traffic enforcement in neighborhoods. And by unfreezing this position, this allows us to complement that and enhance our traffic enforcement efforts. Our officers that are in patrol, when they have the opportunity, they will do traffic enforcement in their assigned areas. However, as our calls for service sometimes makes that difficult because they're either going from call to call or they have to investigate the calls that they have, so they don't get as much opportunity to do traffic enforcement as we'd like to see. And with our traffic enforcement strategy, it's about voluntary compliance. We want people to voluntarily comply with the law, and with the fear that the officer might be out there, they may get caught if they decide to run that red light. It's all about the voluntary compliance. Whereas we allow the officers the discretion to decide if they're going to issue a warning or they're going to issue a citation for that offense. Our officers are human. When they see the price of everything going through the roof, a typical speeding offense runs anywhere from $170 to $278. And they may feel like, this person might be in some financial crisis. They may not be able to afford the speeding ticket. If I can give them a warning instead, hopefully that gives the same outcome. It's all about voluntary compliance, and we want to make sure that they are voluntarily complying with those laws. The remaining budget drivers that we have, again, with overtime and holiday pay, that's all based on the salary increases from those negotiated salary increases from last year. So anytime the base pay goes up, overtime pay increases as well as holiday pay. Our communications line has seen an increase because in the last bargaining agreement with the command union, supervisors receive stipends for use of their personal cell phones while on duty. Sergeants receive $45 a month, lieutenants receive $65 a month because they are using their personal cell phones on duty a lot. And that was negotiated for them to be compensated for that. Also, we established satellite phone service for our mobile command post. We found that in any large incident, the broadband and wireless capabilities shrink because everybody's on their phone. So being able to utilizing a satellite phone, we're able to skip that and have effective communications with the people that we need to. We saw that with Lewiston in October, and it worked out well for us. And there's been an increase in vehicle repairs. Our vehicles being run longer in service, brake systems, brake pads, rotors, water pumps. in those Tahoes, those are consistently driving that increase for us. We have 14 marked patrol units in the fleet. We have 16 auxiliary vehicles that we use, and overall, the Tahoes have worked really well for us. They've held up well. They're probably the best that we've seen since the Crown Vic. Crown Vic was the yacht of police service. It was the workhorse, and I can't believe that Ford actually got rid of them, but the Tahoes have worked well for us. In training, again, with a young staff, we have to make sure that they're meeting their training requirements and needs to ensure that they're getting proper training to be able to properly do their job. With our upgrade to the latest taser last year, we now have to fire 4 cartridges instead of 2 as part of recertification. So that's a driven increase for us in that training line. Also this year, we are slated to attend a CALIA conference to receive our department reaccreditation. This will mark almost 20 years that we've been accredited. We're one of 3 in the state that have attained national accreditation, and we've maintained that for almost 20 years now, and it's been great for us. It's actually been a good recruitment tool. In this latest recruitment spree, we've had several officers that have come to us, that applied to us because we were nationally accredited, and they wanted to be part of that professional agency. And in closing, fair and balanced policing, that's the goal of our law enforcement service delivery. We want to make sure that we're delivering fair and balanced policing every time. The back of our cruisers say expect excellence. That's the motto that we've set for the last 20 years, and that's what our citizens expect. And we strive to hit it right every single time. And when we don't, we learn from it, and we make sure that we don't try to make the same mistake twice. Any questions?
Questions or comments from the council?
Thank you for that report. Sure. Much appreciated. I was just wondering if you could go into a little more detail. I'm looking at like overtime, regular, the increase there in 2025 fiscal year compared to 2024. I know you do have that as a budget driver and it reflects the salary increases. Could you just shed some additional light and detail on that?
Yeah, so what we did is we were able to go back and with our scheduling software, we were able to do a 3-year analysis and try to forecast the amount of overtime for FY25. And one, the increase in the base wages drives those salary increases across the board between both patrol and command. And what we did is we took each line and tried to forecast the amount of time that was used, and we assigned a dollar value to that, whereas we noticed that for officers that will fill vacation replacement, so they're being paid overtime to fill a vacation slot, sometimes they'll ask for compensatory time or comp time instead, where they're getting time off instead of cash for working those hours. When officers are drafted and they're forced to fill a vacancy, we find that they prefer to be paid overtime for that versus taking that comp time. So we're able to dive down and really show and forecast what each line required for the number of hours to be replaced. So statistically, we were able to show that over the last 3 years, we were seeing increases in vacation replacement, sick time replacement, versus being held over for calls or whatnot. So we were able to assign values to that and really drill down in the amount of overtime that's required. Yep.
Other questions from the council? Council Wise.
Thank you very much. I was just looking at the accreditation website, and it talks about benefits from this accreditation that reduces risk and liability exposure. You said that you guys have been a part of it for 20 years. Sure. Have you, since having this accreditation, have we seen as a department the lowering of risk and liability?
Oh, absolutely. Over the last 18 years, we've only had, I think, one federal lawsuit that we had to settle on, where most of them are taken care of in the very early stages. Once they see that we're accredited, they get our policies and they go, well, there's really no room for us here. And if you look at, the Auburn Police Department is the fourth or fifth largest department in the state. In 2023, we had 8 disciplinary incidents in 2023. 8. Of which 75% of those were written warnings for various reasons. So if you take 25,000 calls for service, you have 51 officers. Our disciplinary rates are very low as compared to other departments throughout the state. And that goes back to accreditation because we set very stringent standards. We set high expectations for our officers. They know what to expect. They know the standards that they need to meet, and it's worked very well for us. We've reduced a lot of risk, and again, it's been a plus for us.
Thank you.
Other questions? Council Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Moen, I know the PAL Center the program was started by the police department. Where do they fall now? Are they in your budget somewhere, or are they moved into like the rec?
PAL has been moved into the rec budget. That happened in the last budget cycle or 2 years ago.
Yeah, PAL programming had never been actually in the PD budget. It was all under its own programming through either fundraising grants, whatever they were bringing money into. However, the programming cost for staffing was moved into rec. I think it was actually 3 years ago.
So in other words, if we wanted to see the breakdown of the cost of the PAL Center, which is a program and thing that I fully support, we will be able to find the breakout in the rec department's budget, like we can find like Ingersoll or the senior center?
For the for the city side of the budgeting for PAL, yes, that's where you would find it.
Okay, you say city side. What about the non-city side?
So so PAL program is a 501c3. We can ask them for their budgeting information as well and what they've spent funds on for programming. We could request that from them.
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you, Chief.
Council Gary, I believe the last page of the police department packet does have the breakdown. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
There is a breakdown in this packet. If you look in the police department materials for tonight, on the last page, there's an APL summary sheet. Other questions from the council? Chief, I have a few questions. If I want to make sure I understand correctly. So the three, if I'm looking at the org chart on the,
Yes,
I
sir.
guess your second sheet. If I understand this correctly, the two frozen positions in the PACE, one of those would become the civilian position and one would be an additional PACE officer, and this school resource, one's frozen, that's going to be the juvenile detective, is that correct?
Out of the 3 frozen positions that are currently on there, yes. Under PACE, where we have 2 officers and 1 frozen, that would be unfrozen for that second PACE officer there. And then if you look over to under support services, where you see school resource officers, where there are 2 and 1's frozen, that one would be unfrozen for the youth services detective.
And so we have one current SRO, and where is that person assigned?
The current SRO is assigned to Little High School.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the PSY team, and I don't see any details in here. Is the PSY team going to continue in this upcoming budget year at the same staffing as this current year?
Yes, the PSY falls under business and community development, and they have a grant that they're using to fund those positions.
Right, so we'll see the detail of that when we see Mr. Holmes'
Yes.
You will.
budget? Okay, thank you. I guess the last thing I wanted to follow up on is traffic. It probably won't come to any surprise to you that one of the 2 most frequent calls and emails I get is about traffic enforcement and the lack of it in the city, and I certainly appreciate the problems over the last couple of years with staffing.
Yes, sir.
So I understand if you fill these positions, we'll have some additional traffic enforcement. I would make 2 comments about that. You mentioned a strategy. Would you be able to enlighten the council going forward, if that position is set, about what the goals are and where your traffic enforcement efforts will take place?
Certainly. That traffic enforcement officer will be dedicated to high crash areas within the city. We will be able to take our data from our crime analysts and determine high crash locations, determining the type of crash that happens there. Are they running red lights? Is there speed involved? And we'll be able to assign that officer to those areas based on those crash numbers to be able to focus on those areas to try to reduce the number of crashes in those areas. We've shown that in the past when we've had the staffing, we've done that before where we've put officers in high crash areas working those enforcement details, and have really had a positive effect on reducing the number of crashes in the city.
Yeah, so I appreciate the crash areas, and you'd be able to set some goal for the department about the reduction in crashes, so over the next couple of years, we could see the impact that that would have?
Yes, we would start with getting that officer out there and seeing the efforts that are being made and the effects that they're being made, and then from there, try to correlate an actual number to be able to do that. Right out of the gate, I'd be hesitant to do so because I want to see what kind of effect they have first. And then once we have kind of a proven track record, we can go in and set specific goals for that officer and for those different types of reductions.
Thank you. I might suggest also, they may not be high crash areas, but I'd be happy to share the locations in the city that I get frequent calls about, various roads
Absolutely.
for high speed. I see a bunch of head shakings
I can
here.
probably name most of them.
You probably can, but I think, it would be beneficial to put some attention in those areas as well.
Certainly.
And then the last comment I would make is, while I appreciate your comments about voluntary compliance, and I certainly in general agree with that, given the current state of things, the ratio here of warnings to citations is troubling to me. I don't think you're getting the effect with that type of ratio, and I would ask that you and your team think about that and whether or not a 8 to 9 to 1 ratio is actually getting the effect that we want in voluntary compliance in the actual behavior of drivers.
Yes, sir. Duly noted. Thank you.
Chief, also, when we do the weekly tallies, we show the traffic citations, and that's something we push out through social media.
Certainly.
But those traffic citations, those would not include the criminal summonses that come from a result of that traffic
Correct.
stop. So that's something we might want to take a look at and have the analysts actually pull those criminal summonses, because I think you had 800 or somewhere around there. A lot of those were as a result of traffic stops that were of a criminal nature on the stop. Might have been criminal speed, might have been operating after suspension, whatever it might have been.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable, especially you might stop them for a traffic violation, and if you make some other on-site arrest, you probably just forego writing the traffic ticket.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And Councilor Weisner asked about risk mitigation for CALIA. The other piece too that we can probably highlight for you at some point is we do receive a reduction in our MMA risk insurance as a result of being accredited. It's a 10% reduction in our costs, and so that helps offset the cost for CALIA.
With that offset, it pretty much pays for the CALIA program.
Councilor Milks?
The thought on the traffic citation piece is that maybe to get the voluntary compliance, we could create some sort of a campaign and say, hey, Fairview Ave, or for example, if you get pulled over there,
Fairview Ave, Minot Ave, Route 4.
if you get pulled over there, you are not getting a warning. And say, hey, we're looking for voluntary compliance, but we're up to staff, and we're not being so nice anymore.
Sure.
And just warn, maybe Liz could put a nicely worded out and put it out. There's a lot of people that see us on Facebook.
Yep.
Other questions or comments from the council? Great, thanks very much, Chief.
Thank you.
I will move on to Business and Community Development, General Assistant.
Chief, thank you for all you guys have been done. You guys are really doing a great job.
Thank you, Counselor. It's greatly appreciated. It's been the last 6 months of '23 have been extremely challenging for us.
Yeah.
But again, our staff has done a great job, and I'm very proud of them.
Well, thank you.
Good evening. See if I can figure this out. Oh, that worked well. Hey, that's me. Super. So real quickly, just a kind of a highlight of what the department looks like for business and community development, which also encompasses general assistance. So obviously, this is myself and my executive assistant, and then we have basically 4 other areas. We have public health, which I think everybody knows Jen, and then just general assistance manager, Jamie, and the HUD program coordinator, which is actually the person who really oversees all of the HUD programs as far as their implementation. You probably haven't met her yet. She's fairly new, Nancy. And then the community development manager, which really is the person who does the 5-year plan, the 1-year plan, kind of does a lot of the analysis around the programs and make sure that everything's going like it's supposed to. The lead grant coordinator position is a part-time position at this point, and the HUD program coordinator is taking on a lot of those duties currently. It just seems to be a better fit for us to not have that other person, so we're in the process of that job will probably go away. And if you go back to general assistance, which used to be 1 person, basically it was almost a part-time position, we've now hired 2 additional staff members full-time to do that. And we'll talk about that as we go through this, but the increases within general assistance have been dramatic and very time-consuming, obviously for a lot of reasons that we'll talk about more. The big thing that drives a lot of our work is we did a community survey this year, which we've done for the last few years. And I want to thank not only my staff, but I want to thank some of the city councilors in this room. I want to thank all of our partners and our communications department for an amazing job this year. As you can see, we had a 424% increase in the response to that survey. We really got out there. And again, people literally took pieces of paper, knocked on doors, had small groups in different areas that participated in this to really find out what are the driving forces here. And as you can see, still, which, that was not me, by the way.
I shouldn't step on that cord, I guess. Sorry.
As you can see, 58.9% of the surveys listed affordable housing as top funding priorities. So, and that number has been pretty consistent and continues to be important to the community. So youth services and parks and trails. So, to look at how we address some of these things. So the parks and trails, as you know, is part of the TIF that we did for the Diamond Point self-storage unit up here. We made sure we included some money in that will come back to us to be able to do more trails. The department was involved in the $3.9 million congressional directed spending request to get that money. The public services section are all of our partners that we'll talk about this evening, where we're actually providing either support for them to do their job, what their roles are, or we're actually funding positions at some of these self-support agencies to come in and actually work in our space. But what we found under the other category, which was 31%, we dug in that a little bit deeper, and that's what the graph on the right-hand side is. We actually took those, set them aside, and did keyword searches to kind of find out what is it they were talking about in those other areas. And the biggest one was roads and sidewalks, and which was kind of rewarding for us a little bit, even though it was a concern for them, is that we'd shifted this past year to do a lot more of that infrastructure, safety, sidewalk type work. and we're looking to do more of that as we move forward. So we're happy to see that that is something that they want us to be focusing on. Next, I gotta do that, huh? Next is the Public Health Office. So you talked a little bit about PSY, and I apologize. On the first slide, I didn't talk about what was in the bottom left-hand corner, which is all those contracted positions. I will go back real quick, and I apologize. It was changed today. The Tri-County, the 2 PSY workers, you have the CCI Homeless Resource Coordinator, the HRY Homeless Youth Case Manager, and the Rumford Group Housing Navigator are all positions that we are paying for through grant dollars to administer and to oversee, and they have space within our office, and this is to help reduce the cost of our GA stuff, because by finding people housing, hopefully, is better than having homeless people. The HRY program is the homeless youth, where we're actually finding, the people we are contracting with are finding sponsor families to take them in and take care of those things. And the Homeless Resource Coordinator is the person who's actually going out into the community, working with the people in the encampments that are identified. That process has really come a long ways this year. I think it's worked much better. We've been able to get out there. We'll be sharing some data, very soon. We start talking about our new plan of the number of people that have been actually served, and you'll see some of that in here as well this evening. So I apologize for skipping over that. But the PSY program under public health has done huge things this year. So 1,124 co-response calls with police and fire in follow-ups by a PSY worker. And we only had the PSY worker for a very few number of months. There's been some turnover in that position. We are in the process. We should have one starting back up very quickly. And we now have 2 approved, one that were provided to us through the council, and as well as an external grant from Hannaford, right? Yeah. They did 83 well-being checks calls, 14 psychiatric calls, 59 PSY follow-ups, and 46 community contacts. I mean, you can see what's on the slide there. I mean, a tremendous amount of impact in a very short time that made a big difference. I was glad that the chief mentioned it, because it's been a great program for them as well as fire. And having 2, so we'll actually be able to have 1 in each area, is going to be a huge help once we get that fully staffed. General assistance. This has been the biggest change in our department over the last couple of years that you can imagine. So, for simple terms, 70% of the money we provide to the clients is reimbursed by the state back to us. We are not reimbursed for any of the staffing, the rent, the overhead, everybody's time. It's basically just what the money we put out to the clients. So in 2023, we had 930 applications. We are currently seeing between 40 and 50 clients per week, which is a lot of people to try to see, because these are not 5-minute interactions. A lot of these take in excess of 2 hours. Depending on the language barriers or the situation, new applications take a long time, and it's we're spending tens of thousands of dollars on translation services just to make sure we can actually work with these clients and make sure we're getting everything taken care of for them and for the city. So those changes over that time have really made a huge difference. Just processing the Hannaford food vouchers is probably between 4 and 6 hours a week. Is taken up in staff time just to process those food vouchers, to make sure that the finance department gets what they need, Hannaford gets what they need, which all has to be done pretty much manually at this point. So of those 930 applications that were filed, 794 were eligible. So therefore 85% of them. So we have a denial rate of around 15%. And that number is starting to climb even more, because now we are fully staffed and we have the time. Similar to like what the chief was saying a little bit ago. Once you have the time to actually work this, you can actually work it better for everybody. 342 cases with asylum pending. So that means that in a lot of these cases, these people cannot work until they get a work permit. So once they arrive, they're pretty much always eligible, and then you move them through the system, and it could be anywhere from months to 18 to a year and a half before they're able to even get a work permit to work. So the things we're putting in place, we just got a new contract with one of our partners where we're going to be doing some English classes and some process classes where we'll have one of the immigrant resource groups, MIRS, will be coming in to have these classes in our space with people that we've told them as part of their general assistance, they need to be going to these classes. So work fair is something we've wanted to do for a long time. Since I got here, it used to be something before the pandemic. It went away. Now by implementing this, we'll be able to actually have people required to go to classes, required to do certain things so that they can stay eligible for the program. So as you can see, the community impact, the kind of the housing assistance, utilities, all of these numbers obviously have skyrocketed over the last year. Community development itself. So the Community Development Department basically redistributed Department of Housing and Urban Development and ARPA funds totaling $851,324 last year. $172,000 for CDBG and lead housing rehab. So the lead grant we have is a 3-year, $3 million grant. 75% of the people or more don't qualify for the program that apply. So the biggest problem we're having is that if you don't have a child under 6, or if you make too much money, you're unable to access the program. The other problem we're running into is that $25,000 is the maximum amount of money we can put into one of these projects. So if you're looking at doing a project that's going to cost $50,000, $60,000, $25,000 isn't enough for some people to be able to offset that and make it work. So they wind up being denied because they're unable to have that match to make that program, because we can't do half a project. So if we're going to do a project, we have to do the whole project. $65,000 in CDBG infrastructure improvements, almost $500,000 in CDBG and home-funded public services. So these are the agencies we're working with. So these are the nonprofits that we're working with to help fund them so that they can do the work, to get out, work with the homeless folks, do things like that. $168,000 in energy efficiency rebates. That's slowly ramping down. We're getting low on funds there. That should probably be done by the end of June at the latest. And then the ARPA Victory Garden vouchers last year, $20,603. I can tell you that as of today, when I was told the numbers, we are pretty much at capacity for the number of people that have applied and the money we have available. So that program is still very, very popular. Impact. 673 residents received emergency food resources. That's the grab-and-go program that was obviously run mostly by the PAL Center and the rec staff. 32 residents received scholarships, so summer camp for kids through the rec program. We provide money for that. 136 residents received emergency housing assistance. So this would be through Rumford Group Homes, the HRY folks, CCI, and Safe Voices, money we provided to them. 214 residents received matching efficiency rebates, and of course the 141 people who got the garden money. Business development. So this is funded by city funds, tax dollars, tax instrument financing that is taken in, as well as ARPA programs for 2023. So $98,380 for the 4 neighborhood corner store programs, and I believe there's another one that's been approved this year already, so that'd be the last one in the group. $10,000 for 2 commercial ag programs, $300,000 in 2 ARPA business loans, and $69 million projected private investment in the 6 new TIF districts. So pretty good deal there. The community impact was $2.7 million in TIF revenue for the capital projects. We created 24 full-time and 30 part-time jobs through that work, and we saved 36 jobs from relocating outside the city. Now I want to talk about the drivers. So the overall budget year over year, the real changes are obviously the pay increases that occurred last year. But demand for service has really been what is driving this budget in a dramatic way. We're looking at, almost $1 million for general assistance this year, significantly more than previously. However, 432% increase in applications year over year, 385% increase in qualified applications, 2,400% increase in utility assistance. So a lot of these things were driven in a lot of ways. If you all remember the ERA program during the pandemic where they paid everybody's rent, and that was great. Well, as soon as that program ended, we saw a dramatic increase in evictions and trying to save people and everything going on there. Same thing with the CMP. So CMP put some things in place that were not beneficial. There was federal and state programs to help pay those bills. And when all this stuff came to an end, that's when things started to happen. We saw dramatically higher CMP bills than historically. The CMP rates had gone up. Fortunately, they've gone down about 7 cents a kilowatt recently for the standard offer, which is what we see most people that come to us are on as a standard offer. So we're seeing a little bit there. But when you can't shut somebody's power off between October and April, and then come April they can't afford to pay the bill, they're coming to the General Assistance Office. And I can tell you that the advice from the state is that these are emergencies and we need to pick up that tab in a lot of cases. So that's been really difficult. So we're working with some of those problems to make sure we can push back. So our response, obviously, was 2 new general assistance positions, 2 new contracted PSY co-responders, 3 new contracting housing navigators, and 5 nonprofit service providers working within our office to help offset some of these. So even though literally everything below the general assistance are contracted employees, that was the response to be able to take up the need for what we were seeing for the increase in the services that are required.
Questions or comments from the council?
Question about the 3-year grant, the lead abatement grant. So am I interpreting that correctly, that you're just, because of the criteria within the grant, selection criteria, we may not use all of that? And if that's the case, do you get an extension? What happens?
So there would be an extension if we're not able to get through it. And this is happening across the country. There's been a lot of pushback from the lead grant recipients talking about, look, there's not enough money per unit. We need to find different ways. Finding contractors are really tough initially. We're working, with other communities to see how they're doing, the ones that are being successful. Some communities across the country have actually created their own people who go in and do the work. Not something I would recommend. I've been in that field before. I would stay away from that. But yeah, we are working with HUD on all of that because we don't want to not use the money. We probably have the highest percentage of lead affected buildings, here on the East Coast than anywhere else in the country. So we need to fix it.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the council? Council Walker.
Glenn, can you tell me if a landlord does not live in his apartment house, can we help him to do things to it to fix it up, or can we not?
So what I can tell you is that the program that we had created through the ARPA program did not allow absent landlords to be able to use the funding in that program. So we had a curb appeal grant that if you were a owner-occupied 4 units or less, then we had a program we would be able to balance out and help you with a facade or a curb appeal type things. That did not allow for absent, when I say absent, not like out of state, they could live in the building next door, but if they didn't live in that building, we weren't able to help them.
Do we have a program within our own that can help people do that? We used to years ago. I don't know about lately.
Currently, we don't.
Okay, next question. How did we remove it? Because I know at
Years ago,
least-
you mean?
At least 4 years ago, we had it
So most of what was available before were renovation type things. I mean, it would fix a porch and stuff. There was very little that would, provide siding, roof, things like that. What we've done is we've taken an emergency type thing. So if you got a leak in your roof, your boiler's blown up, things like that, then we have some money available for those types of emergencies. But based on the audit that we had a couple of years ago, it was clear that those particular renovation programs were difficult to manage and to make work effectively. So we took some of that away, and we've focused more on the infrastructure, which was identified this year and last year in our surveys that were important to the community.
Okay, last question, I guess. If you haven't spent all that money, if we haven't had enough people apply for it, would it be possible that we could do something near the end of the budget so that we could help someone out if they wanted to apply for such a thing as side-in or fix their porch? Because there's a lot of people as landlords that have that may not live in their apartment.
So that's an ARPA grant, correct?
Yes, that was ARPA funds that was put forward.
So we could look at what's left in that, Council Walker, and the council could think about amending the terms of that particular project. If we're going to do that, we would have to do that right away because the ARPA money has to be encumbered by December 31st of this year. We have 2 years to liquidate after that, but if we're going to make a change to that, it's something. So perhaps the manager could let us know next week at the meeting what's left in that particular line. Councilor Milk?
Well, I think there was also a program through the CDBG.
Historically, there was.
That you could get per unit, you could get X number of dollars, and I'm not sure when that ended.
2 years ago.
Okay.
It was one of the results of the audit that we just stopped that program because of the.
It was, I can vouch, it was very difficult to get. It was millions of paperwork, and you had to get your tenants to sign stuff, and it was.
We've tried to make things as simple and as efficient as possible so that we don't have to fight for that as much.
So what are we doing with the CDBG money now?
So.
Because that might have been what Councilor Walker was asking about too, was the old CDBG grants that we used to have.
So currently for the, we have plenty, there's about, affordable housing is $48,000, public improvements, $1.6 million, public services, $80,000, for about a total of $1.8 million. Now, just to clarify, this is the most money we've had in a long time, simply because back before the pandemic, we were living on about roughly $700,000 a year. And then through the pandemic, there was other funding that was coming in, so we were spending that money on other projects. So this money's been accumulating. So that's why we had the ability to make the purchase on Minot Avenue coming up very quickly here, is we're using some of this funding to do that, which is that backlog of funding. So moving forward, we're going to have roughly $450,000 a year in CDBG funds and approximately $250,000 a year in home funds. So when you look at that programming, we'll be bringing that forward to you based on what we hear from the survey very, very soon, for you to be able to have your bite at the apple, to look at it and see what you think we should be doing with it. But we'll be making a presentation based on that, I think, within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
That budget where the CDBG funding is itemized in here somewhere? I don't
When it comes to itemized, I don't know what you have.
This is today because it wasn't in my.
So those are grant funds that are actually
Outside the budget.
outside this budget that are run through
CDBG is not
CDBG.
budgeted through
That's
here,
correct.
right,
You
okay,
adopt that as a separate
That's
budget?
Right. That's right.
Yep.
Yep.
I would like to agree with the mayor, though, if you could. I'd like to see what we have in the opera, and can we use some of that if we change a couple rules?
Yeah, the mayor and I had been talking about this. I met with staff probably a week or so ago. Basically, we took a look at all of our programs, and the ones that either have not garnered any interest or that we think should be reappropriated, we're preparing that for a future workshop. We'll present those to you in the amount that we're going to bring and suggest that you reallocate.
Awesome. And when is the dates? What is the dates that we have to have that encumbered by?
December 31st, we have
Of
to have
this
it
year.
encumbered, and then, of this year, and then we have 2 years to liquidate it. So long as we have a contract or a purchase order or something in effect by the end of this calendar year, we'll have 2 years to complete the project.
Awesome.
Other questions or comments by the council?
Yes.
Council Eisner.
Thank you. I keep hearing grants, but I remember in the process there was a lot of low interest loans that landlords and others could take part of. Is there actually grants where people will not have to pay some money back?
So most of the proposals we put forward under the ARPA dollars were put out as forgivable loans. The reason for that is to be able to drive, the discipline side of it. So once you give somebody a check, you want to make sure that they do what they were supposed to with it. So they had to have that finished by a certain time, and then the loan will be forgiven. So we talk about them as grants because in the end, they will be forgiven as long as they do what they're supposed to do with it.
Thank you. And I concur with Councilor Milk's comment. I mean, the process is a lot of paperwork and sometimes hard to get the paperwork signed by tenants, and depending on what they wish to sign and what they don't.
Yep.
So, Glenn, I have a couple follow-up questions
Sure.
here. On GA, in what's in the budget package, the FY '25 department request and totals $901,200.
Yep.
Is that before or after the state reimbursement?
That's the amount we'll put out, and then we'll get 70% of that back.
When we go over revenues later tonight,
Right.
you'll see the revenue offset.
Yeah, okay.
And my budget always looks weird because there's revenue offsets that don't show up till later.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to make sure what that was. And then I was not quite clear on PSY, the $300,000 that's in the it says it's a 2-year grant. Is that for 2 people for FY '25 and '6, or was that '24 and '25?
So I believe it's for 24 and 25 and 25 and 26, because Hannaford is a 2-year grant and ARPA was a 2-year grant, so there's going to be an overlap. Obviously, based on the numbers we're projecting, I'll be coming back to advocate that this is something that becomes forever.
Right. So make sure I understand that. The FY '25, there's 2 positions, 100% grant covered. In FY '26, there will be 1.
We'll be able to
We're
do part of that
anticipating 1.
because we didn't get the full year in '24, so there's going to be a fair amount left and some of the money that was actually prepared as part of the ARPA budget is, the police department and the fire department have been great about not kind of using the portion that was put in there for them, so that hopefully will get us through that second year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? No? Great. Thanks very much, Mr. Holm.
Thank you.
We'll move on to economic development.
Make sure I know what I'm doing here. Okay. So you'll probably notice that the economic development budget is a pretty bare bones budget, very, very minimal, very small. And this year I don't have any increases in any of my line items other than we've got a program that we've been doing the last couple of years, which is business retention expansion, but it hasn't been funded. And it's basically just been me working, figuring things out, and office supplies. But this year we've got bigger plans, and there will be an ask for $10,000 for that. And I'll go into the details of that later on in the presentation. One of the reasons that the economic development budget is relatively small is that this is normally the slide that people put their organizational chart on. Well, the organizational chart's me, but that's because here in Auburn we consider every department to be part of economic development. So, when we have to do some studies for transportation, a lot of that's driven by economic development. So that's where Jonathan Labonte comes in. If we're doing programs that are grant or loan programs for businesses. That's where business and community development comes in. If I'm marketing, that's where the communications department comes in. So I'm probably the one department that works with just about every department. As a matter of fact, when events were under me, we worked with police, fire, and public works quite a bit. So you have really a robust team. It's just we're leveraging our resources. Now, in 2019, there was the citywide strategic plan, and the parts of the strategic plan that that myself and city management looked at that Economic Development Department could play a major role in was the downtown solutions, housing solutions, industrial areas, and park solutions. So everything that we've done in the past year has been based off of what was asked of us in the strategic plan. So throughout the rest of this presentation, I'm going to explain what we've done for these growth goals, and then I'm going to explain what we plan on doing in 2024 for these growth goals. So you've probably seen this a number of times, but for under Downtown Solutions, we came up in 2021 with the 5-year downtown revitalization plan. I won't pull it up, but if you go to goauburn.me, we created that whole story map, and it shows you 7 of the city-owned properties that needed to be sold, and those essentially have been sold for mixed use. And it showed you some of the improvements we need to make to New Auburn, which have been done or are in the process of being done. So it was, and that's another example of all the departments working together. It's kind of spearheaded by economic development, but the actual work's being done by the other departments. When it came to marketing our city-owned properties and marketing for redevelopment, we worked quite a bit, especially on the housing solutions the past couple of years with the Maine Real Estate and Development Association. There's probably not a developer in the state who did not end up being personally invited to come sit in this room so we could explain, what the goals of the city were and what properties were available in the city. And really what we were trying to do is address housing from the supply side of things. And so when it came to our larger properties, the downtown properties, that was being marketed in conjunction with Bolus as well as me, just myself, through Merida. And now we've started selling some of the smaller residential properties, but we had a lot of input from City Council, the previous City Council and this City Council, wanting to make sure that even if it's a small property, that when we sell it to somebody, that it's actually going to be used for housing, or that we know what's going to be done. The challenge there is finding a buyer who is also willing to sign the contract that has the clawbacks in it and all of that. So it creates some challenges and problems, but I think we'll be able to work through some of those. And so those have been marketed through Fontaine. And it's not a big money maker for them because these things just trickle out slowly. You know about the things we have to go through for if it was a tax acquired property, and then once you get that, then you got to work with the wording of the clawback with the buyer. So but at any rate, with the downtown solutions and housing solutions for economic development, those were kind of one solution that we tried to work on together. Then for the industrial and business solutions, we made another story map, which, I'll back up a little bit. The strategic plan called for us to create an identity for our business parks and to identify our industry sectors. And without a doubt, our big industry sectors are manufacturing, warehouse, and distribution. And the numbers prove it, but we're self-proclaimed as well as Maine's manufacturing warehouse and distribution hub. We created this story map, and you can go through the story map. That, again, is on gomaine.gov. goauburn.me. That's been very handy for me when I talk with our businesses and our elected officials. But what you'll see coming up in 2024 is we're going to further break out our industry sectors, and we're going to create a dashboard that's a little more interactive. So you can sit there and you have questions, and you start going through the dashboard to pull up information that you want to see. And then the big thing that we did in 2023 is, a lot of times communities talk about partnering with the state level economic development or some of the other organizations. And in my mind, those are usually partnerships just on the surface. You go visit a company and they need some kind of state grant or some kind of program, so you put them in touch with the organizations. But what we've done this year is we've really gotten very, very involved with all of these organizations. The Maine Technology Institute, they are the ones who had the funds and were the drivers for applying for the Tech Hub designation for the state. And we stayed very involved, as a matter of fact, helped with the application. So now we're making sure that Auburn is part of that. And the Rue Institute was also part of that, and so we've been spending a lot of time working with the Rue Institute. As we work with these organizations, it also becomes a conduit for leads. Not every business goes to the state saying they're looking to open a new location or something. They oftentimes will go to the Rue Institute or the University of Maine or one of these other organizations. So we've, in the past year, I don't know if it's the first time Auburn's ever joined, but we're now part of the Manufacturers Association of Maine, as well as the Maine Composites Alliance. And then there is the Maine Manufacturer Extension Partnership. That's a group of, they're usually former engineers or plant managers, and they can go in and do a deep dive on offering assistance to your manufacturers. So we've had a real big uptick in these kinds of relationships, which have resulted in really making Auburn part of the conversation when these organizations are thinking about manufacturing, strategic planning for the state at the state level. So, I would say a year or 2 years ago, the conversations when it came to strategically planning things always involved Portland, always involved Brunswick Landing, always involved the University of Maine. And now it's starting to be all those places and Auburn. So in 2023, we had meetings with our manufacturers, mostly our C-suite executives from our manufacturers, to see what kind of pilot programs, what we could do to offer them assistance. I had mentioned before that a lot of communities think they're partnering when they just make referrals between their employers and state agencies. Well, this time we sat down with our manufacturers and said, what can we do to help you? What's not out there? What doesn't exist? And so we created quite a number of pilot programs. One of them was they didn't know how to reach out and bring new Mainers into the workforce. So we started a pilot program where we were introducing new Mainers to the manufacturing sector, and we got a few placed. Which went fairly well. Now, the other thing that you were hearing with community and business development, they talk about the uptick in general services needed, and then some of these new Mainers who can't work yet, all of that. This helps with that. This helps these new Mainers become part of our society, part of our culture, become taxpayers. So it really kind of has helped on many levels. I think the numbers that Glenn had were 200-300 needing help. we've placed about 150. So hopefully those numbers start to come down. You're not going to see it, this year, but hopefully in time it starts to come down. The fact that we started a program for new Mainers led to really, the city had always talked about, or not always, but the last couple of years had been talking about having a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. But we weren't quite sure exactly what types of tasks that person would do. And I think probably the final straw in hiring our diversity, equity, and inclusion person was the fact that we realized we needed somebody who was intimately familiar with the New Mainer community to actually run, or not run, but give a high level of assistance with the New Mainer program. Once we started getting New Mainers in the workforce, the other issue was English. A lot of times they can't speak English. One of the challenges is these people have full lives. They come in, they go to work, they might work 8 or 12 hours. At the end of their workday, they've got to pick their kids up at school or do some of these other things. There are English classes that are in the evening, and many of them take them, but we've started a program in conjunction with Auburn Adult Ed, where Auburn Adult Ed goes into the employers and they teach English once or twice a week for an hour or so, and it's really geared toward workplace English. So you can imagine if you're somebody who doesn't speak English, they'll come in the basic area you work in, they'll put little signs on there in your language and English as to, table, chair, that type of thing. And then they actually have classes for the New Mainers, and they can work on that type of English. We also brought in to meet with our manufacturers Strengthen LA, which is the Chamber's efforts for workforce development. And then there's the federal and state-funded Career Center, which serves our region out of Lewiston. Then, sometimes we've been able to react pretty quick. Could I have you click on that quality of life? And then if you scroll down, I got a call from Auburn Manufacturing saying, we've got an engineer we're trying to bring in. He's from Massachusetts. He doesn't know anything about Maine or Auburn. The chamber used to give us hard copy material to send people, but all we're doing is emailing. So our community development team created this page, which now our manufacturers and other employers can use, that when they're communicating through email, they send the link to this, and this has ways for them to find jobs in Auburn. It has the Chamber of Commerce highlight of Auburn. It's got videos of Auburn so they can see what it's like living in Auburn, that type of thing. Thank you. We can go back to the PowerPoint. So then we also found that as you help people get jobs, not just New Mainers, but a lot of people have issues with transportation getting to and from work. The Western Maine Transportation Services applied for a grant for a pilot program that offers door-to-door bus service for people to get to work. Basically, the way that program works is if you have a shift that you're working and you do live on a bus line and the bus does go by where you work, if you're working third shift at the hospital or someplace, the buses aren't running, so you can use that service. What's been great for our manufacturers is none of them are located on the bus line. So where we really played a vital role was when they were trying to do their grant application, they needed surveys, they needed some input, and from Auburn they had no problems. We provided like 300 surveys within a few days, as averse to other communities that struggle to get that kind of information. So at any rate, the other thing is that I think there are around 3,000 trips now with that bus service. It's really turned out to prove to be a great service. But of those 3,000, I think we're about 2/3 of those trips, City of Auburn. And that's because of economic development constantly communicating with our larger employers. We also, in trying to identify sectors of society that struggle to find jobs or are currently working but they're struggling, and we ended up using the recovery-friendly workplace program. That's another example of community development and economic development working together. Jen Edwards actually worked to bring this nonprofit into our community. What they do is, nowadays you can't just let somebody go if they have a drug or alcohol problem. You've got to work with them. And so this organization will come into our manufacturers and work to help keep that person employed and also help protect the manufacturer from any liabilities and things that are. So that's been a good program for helping people stay employed. Let's see. The ambassador program. This was a program that I had seen and participated in when I was in Florida, and basically what it is, it kind of goes along with that quality of life page that we created. If a manufacturer is recruiting a executive or a head of HR, a engineer, they can contact me, and I find an ambassador from the community to take that person around and show them Auburn. So far, we've only used it once, and I served as the ambassador, but what it helped is that person was coming up from Massachusetts. They had no idea that Lost Valley was right here, and then I could take them to the Stable Ridge Apartments and show them what kind of housing we have, that type of thing. And so what's great about that program is it really helps this person to realize that where they're working is also has great connections within the community. And then, unfortunately, we had the active shooter event in the fall, as well as some weather events. Within a week of the active shooter event coming to a conclusion, we had our manufacturers meeting, and we brought in a speaker who went over prevention and response for active shooter for our manufacturers. And then after, there were various economic recovery programs that we did not set up, but we made sure all of our businesses knew about and could apply for. Now in 2024, what you could look forward to is this group is now getting the opportunity to meet with all these partner organizations that we've been working with. So there's the Apex Accelerator. They came in last week, and we brought in our heads of sales from all of our manufacturers to hear how they could win and market to win federal grants to sell to the federal government. And so that was very popular. The Maine Technology Institute will be coming in, the Rue Institute. The great thing about the Rue Institute is we developed enough of a relationship that they're not just sending one of their people who goes out to the businesses to talk. They're sending one of their top people to come meet with our group. We have presenters on international trade from the Manufacturers Extension Partnership, the Advanced Manufacturing Center up at the University of Maine. They're bringing some people down to talk to our group. The Advanced Composite Center at the University of Maine's coming down, the Manufacturers Association, as well as the Composites Alliance. And again, these are the organizations these are the ones we worked with in 2023, and these are the ones we'll continue to work with in 2024. Now, the retention and expansion program. Again, we've been running, for the past year, what I'd call an extension, a retention expansion program with essentially no budget. but we do need some money to actually further develop our collaboration and our partnerships, to better bring business resources to our major manufacturers. The other thing is which we haven't really done yet, is the strategic plan called for education and recognition for our major industry sectors. And we plan on putting together a program for our manufacturers, which I think will bring, statewide recognition. I think will really put Auburn on the map. And in order to do that, we've got to do some marketing, and it can't just all be in-house marketing. We're working on some matchmaking programs, and in the end, there'll be an impact report. So if you imagine what we've accomplished with essentially no budget for retention expansion, and then you add 10,000 to that, I think we're going to get 5-6-fold what we've been able to accomplish this year. Now, many of you have asked, what industry sectors do we want to see come to Auburn or be in Auburn? And so we always talk about manufacturing, but we're very aligned with what the state has for their industry sectors, which is forest products, life sciences, clean energy, marine and aquaculture, food and agriculture, and outdoor recreation. All of these still have a manufacturing component to them. You look at the marine aquaculture and you think, well, how would Auburn really get involved with that? Well, we actually have Ready Seafood setting up and tooling up here in Auburn, and they bring lobsters from the sea to Scarborough, where they separate them out, and when they get tooled up later this year, they'll actually be creating various frozen entrees that are made with lobster. So we do touch on each of these sectors, but right now, but as we move forward, we'll get into other areas. But for right now, all these key industry sectors, we're approaching it from the manufacturing side of things. And that's because they generate great jobs and they generate a lot of tax dollars. They help broaden the tax base, so it puts less of that tax burden on the residential side of things. And that is it.
Questions or comments from the council? Yeah, Councilor Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jay, for that presentation. This actually may be best answered by the city manager, I'm not sure, but in thinking of the metrics with which we kind of gauge the success of what you're doing, my thoughts come to business property tax, and number of people employed. At what stage do we see those figures? Is that in the what report would give us those metrics to take a look at?
I can answer that. So there are some standard metrics that are used within the economic development world. I just haven't started to apply them yet because I hadn't been doing anything in this area. I was really concentrated on housing. What we're going to be able to do with the dashboard is if we can also collect some information on taxes paid by industry sector, we can roll that information in. Then we can, usually you have your areas of, how many businesses expanded, how many businesses were you able to retain. A great example would be, Procter & Gamble. We had a retention and expansion with them when we had the $80 million expansion that's still going on now. So how many of those projects have we had? The other is how many people got jobs within the sector. Has our various industry sectors reported back to us that they're no longer short-staffed or they're less short-staffed? The challenge we have with workforce is the numbers you get for unemployment at the federal level really aren't great indicators because they don't necessarily show the people who stop looking for jobs, this and that. On my end, the results I'm looking for is, are the businesses doing better? So we'll start looking at some of those. I think that's where you were headed with the question, or were there some other?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. I think where we're also moving towards, I think, Jay's been with us just over 3 years now.
Yeah.
And, some of the experiences that I saw in Jay when I interviewed him was this manufacturing component of what he's been able to do in Virginia and Florida and everywhere else he's been. We did have that housing initiative out the gate, but probably I'd say about 14 months ago, Jay came and said, "You look, a big part of economic development is about expanding the businesses that we currently have already here in Auburn. And so now how do we start building those relationships?" And so in doing that, we've also created a good baseline. And that baseline will now be able to go back through and now take a look at expansions. It's not that every one of these expansions are derived from, Jay having a monthly meeting with the CEOs, but what it is demonstrating is that we're providing resources to the table. They may not be resources that we're necessary funding, but it's the relationships that Jay has at the state level and trying to make sure we're bringing those programs in. But I think you're going to see a great presentation soon of here's what we've been able to do. That when Jay talked about, one, really working with our new Mainers to be hired by manufacturers who have been just struggling to find workforce. Jay's literally was driving the bus with 20 people in the van, getting them to the manufacturer, helping them fill out the applications. Those were the things that he was doing to demonstrate that this could take off for you and this could be really beneficial. And I think Panel M is probably the best example of an industry that said, this is something that we need. We're struggling here with our workforce. And now Jay's been able to introduce maybe 20 plus jobs there anyway. And so workers into those jobs. And so I think those will be some of the data that we'll pick up because we're doing those things. Some of these industries are like, we're able to now bring in another line of manufacturing within our plant because we're seeing a strong workforce. So that's the feedback that we're hearing. And I think those are the numbers you'll see when we do that presentation. I think from when Jay came up with some of the initiatives and plan that he had, we're probably 8 months, 10 months probably in. And I think, we'll be able to demonstrate a lot of the matrix that you're talking about, just to show this is the impact that has had within the city of Auburn.
Thank you. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see that because as you mentioned, if you remove the salary from here, you pretty much got a zero budget here for your department. So I would think that, any justification to raise that would be based on a lot of these metrics. So I'll be eager to see that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council? Council Walker.
Yeah, Jay, this is exciting, and I think it's a win-win for this city, and I think it's going to be great as we move forward. It's the first time we've really ever heard anything in this way to help move us, and I can just see it going. I really can.
Yeah, we're building our value proposition. When you folks approved the idea, at least, of a technology hub, I think that's going to put us on the map. I think some of these other things that we have attached to this retention expansion program are going to put us on the map. And already the governor is starting this Office of New Mainers. They've already reached out to us saying, we're hearing about this stuff you're doing. Can you come talk to us and explain how is this scalable across the state? And I believe it is. Of course, I want it for Auburn first, and then we can expand it.
Yeah, just don't look for a new job, please.
Yeah. Oh, well, keep budgeting me, and I won't.
Councilor Gary.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jay, with this presentation. Auburn has always been a community of many mixed cultures and religions all through the time that Auburn's been Auburn. It's great that you're coming up with these ideas and these programs to help new Mainers feel welcome and part of our community because we are all, like I said, one community. With that said, I think you need to also be a little bit more well-rounded and also reach out to those that haven't had the opportunities, that have lived in Auburn or have come to Auburn. I mean, reach out to bring our high school students that don't know what they want to do from college, or they may never have the money to attend college, no matter how affordable it could or couldn't be. So I think we're missing the opportunity to reach out to them. or people that have lost their jobs and they don't know what to do. And I would like to see another a circle on your chart there saying that we will help all Auburn residents attain these goals.
Yeah.
And to help find new jobs and better their lives, to help their families and even themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because there has been a big focus on new Mainers, and it did make me realize that in creating this PowerPoint presentation, I forgot about some of the things that we are doing for everybody. We actually already have scheduled for April Edward Little High School students visiting our manufacturers. So we are doing some of those. And then I probably should have pointed out, you know, the Career Center that's federally and state funded. When I went and visited with them, they do some things for new Mainers, but primarily what they're doing is helping all of our citizens. And if anything, they needed some kind of guidance and help with the new Mainer portion of it, but that's for everybody. And then I pointed out the Western Maine Transportation Services, the bus service. That's not specific to new Mainers, although it may have sounded that way because I had couched it within that part of the conversation, but that's for everybody. That's for anybody who wants to use the service. I think if you saw the Lewiston Sun Journal article on it, you saw some interviews with people who were using that service, and they weren't new Mainers, they were Mainers. And so it is making me realize beyond this PowerPoint, you know, it's hard because you want to capture the essence of what you're doing. But I appreciate you pointing out, and I'll make more effort to, for one, point out when we are doing things for everybody, and also work on some programs that are for everybody.
Thank you kindly, and I don't mean any disrespect
Oh, no,
to you
I understand.
or anybody else that you've been helping, but we're one community and we got to help everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Council Cowan? No. Council Milks?
I would say, in fairness to Jay, and I understand where you're coming from, Counselor, if anybody is looking for work, they should reach out to the Economic Development Department, because I actually had a tenant that was unemployed who's not a new Mainer, and I had connected that person with Jay, and he reached out to several people, so he's more than willing to help anybody. So I just wanted to throw a little.
Yeah, and we'll, as you know, as community and business development and economic development works together more and more, and my office is now over there, we're going to start to be able to work and help people who are coming in for general assistance to first and foremost get them that assistance that they need, but then also start working on helping them find good paying jobs. And a lot of the people coming in for that general assistance are not new Mainers, they're Mainers.
Other questions or comments from the council? No? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 7:25. And the next presentation will be from the Finance Department. Maybe.
I just did exactly what Phil did there with that microphone. Okay. Hello. I've never used this remote before. I'm gonna just the arrows, I suppose. Okay. So this is the organizational chart for the Financial Services Department. You will see that the clerk division is under here, and clerk did present to you all already. Part of Phil's vision for combining departments, such as he did with public services, for example, where he put public works, engineering, and facilities and energy under one director. It's similar to what this is meant to look like. So the city clerk, the tax collector, the finance department staff, and the assessing division would all report, or do all report to me. So that's why they're included on this org chart. I won't go back over everything you've learned from clerk. I think you've heard her presentation and understand. Assessing division, you've heard from them recently as well. I do have some bullet points in here talking about what they do, just because they are part of finance and always have been. But I won't get too into detail with that division just because you have heard from them. You'll notice the green section up here. I think you've seen this with some other departments as well. It's color-coded so that you can see that that's not part of the org chart as it stands at this moment, but that is part of the request that you'll see in my slides. So this is our department by the numbers. There are over 10,000 accounts for real estate and personal property that are managed by our staff. There's over almost $4 million in loans also managed by our staff through CDBG and HUD funding. Their finance manager is part of the finance department. The tax department has over 15,000 motor vehicle transactions alone in a year. We also manage over $8 million in HUD and CDBG funds outside of the loans themselves. We have payroll staff that handles, on average, 310 employees per week in payroll. As you've heard from Jonathan Labante's presentation from the airport, our finance department staff has taken over a lot of the financial burden from there. It takes about, on average, 20 hours a week to process everything for the airport. So that's a new bullet for us. The in-person staff on the tax line has over 40,000 customer transactions in a year. That averages about 44 in-person customers a day. Our accounts payable and receivable staff, which is one person, handles over 13,600 invoices in a year. So I've separated these out within those divisions that you've seen in the org chart. So our financial team includes myself, Cindy McNeil, which is that business and community development finance manager that I mentioned, Gina, who's our senior accounting assistant, Emma and Anne, who are also accounting assistants who handle, it says Anne, but it's said Anne. She's German. It's very cool. She's new and great. They handle our payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable. And then we have Tracy, who many of you may have heard her voice. She is now the switchboard operator for the city. So now when someone calls in, they don't get that really long recording and have to wait at least 5 minutes to find the department that they're looking for. They actually have someone there to answer the phone and answer their questions. So the finance department team, these are some of their main duties. We handle the annual financial audit. We advise on fiscal policy. We administer the budget. We also maintain a fixed assets list and administer the city's insurance coverage for all our property and casualty. We also review and coordinate workers' compensation claims. We post and reconcile all school and city financial transactions. So school does have accounting staff. However, everything from school does have to import into our financial software, so we manage that. As I mentioned before, we handle payroll. That includes for the library, airport, and 911 communication center. We handle the bond administration, provide dedimus justice services. I am the dedimus justice for our department. Sue is the dedimus justice for clerk division. We also support all city departments. That is our job. That's our one of our main jobs is the internal customer service. We manage and reconcile multiple investments accounts and the debt service payments. So many of you have seen everyone on this list. This is the tax division. So this tax team is who you'll see when you first walk into City Hall on that first floor. A lot of them actually have been here for more than 20 years, or at least been in government for at least 20 years. So we have Cindy, who's our tax collector, Tina, Megan, and Elizabeth, or E-Liz, because we have two Liz's. They're all the tax assistants. They're responsible for collecting and safeguarding any monies received for payments. So they bill and collect property tax collections. They do a lien and disposition process. They do all of the inland fisheries and motor vehicle licenses. They handle the daily bank deposits, and that includes for the entire city. So any recreation cash, planning and permitting, any other department, all of that monies collected comes through the tax department, is verified and deposited through there. We also assist the city clerk's office in this division. There's cross-training involved with that. And they have to follow and remain up to date on all regulations for motor vehicle and inland fisheries and state tax-related law. As I said, you've heard from the assessing team recently, but this is the current team. So we have Karen, who's our city assessor. We have Joe, who's the deputy assessor, and we have Ozzy, who's the appraiser. We did have Natalie, who was the senior appraiser, but many of you may have seen her in the paper. She just took a job as a town manager, so we're very excited for her. That's leaves a vacancy for us at the moment, but we hope to fill that soon. So the assessing team has to analyze title of all property. They help prepare the city tax commitment. They administer exemptions and special state programs. They process abatement requests. They create tax maps. And that is with all those, the over 10,500 accounts that we have to administer. So some of our budget drivers are insurance premiums. As I stated, the finance department is in charge of administering the insurance program for the city for all property and casualty. Premiums are going up, so that's one of the budget drivers for us. You'll also notice an increase in training. So there's staff certifications and updates from the states that we have to stay up to date with. I mentioned that before as well. The assessors, the tax staff, city clerk staff are all mandated by state law, state statutes on almost everything that we do. And as you've heard from most departments, salaries is a budget driver. Not to play a broken record, but we were not budgeting for any salary increases or changes here. It was in salary reserves before, so you'll see that change here. It's no longer in salary reserves. We're budgeting for actuals. In our salary totals, we have the addition of the switchboard operator, which is at 50%. You've heard from Donna in the recreation department. We're sharing that one 50-50. We have our senior appraiser who is not a new position, but it is newly budgeted position. We were able to bring that person on to assist the assessing staff with all the many projects they have coming up that you're well aware of, through some salary savings from the vacancy that was there for some time. And as I stated on the org chart, that green request was for an executive assistant. So just to explain why I'm asking for that, as somebody in finance, I don't like to ask for anything additional unless I absolutely find it necessary. And you'll notice in some of the changes that we made with the budget, as Phil's explained, we're basing our budget off of actuals rather than trying to kind of pad that budget. We talked about bringing some of those utility accounts in together and trying to lessen that burden of all those 5% that we would normally tell people to put in. But with those 4 divisions in that org chart, there's a lot of administrative oversight with that. Having a central person to respond, have that general knowledge to be able to assist and solve rather than send off. I think we talked about that with Switchboard as well, rather than having to send someone off to find a question and talk to 5 different departments, right? Having that central knowledge system. Customer service, as I mentioned, is the basis of everything that we do, both internal and external. Excellency in customer service is one of my main goals, and that's something that with any staffing cuts or changes tends to suffer first. You'll notice a larger line in the lobby from people having only 2 people on staff in front, for example. There are some special requests that we would have to close the window for. Some of those are just normal business, like commercial registrations. There are some companies that have 100 registrations for that one company here in Auburn. To process those registrations, somebody sitting at that front has to close that window. If you walk in and you see that window, it says window closed, the perception is that that person is not helping anybody. Of course, they're doing those 100 registrations, but how would somebody that walks in know that, right? So having those special projects move to a person kind of in the back where a lot of our finance staff is, for example, just helps not show that to customers. It's easier to have all of the windows open. Everybody that's there, sitting there, is available to help anybody that walks in. Reduces wait time for people, as well as makes people feel better that everybody that's there is there for them. Having that executive assistant could assist with any personnel or HR related duties. So there are some department level HR and personnel duties that are required. There's evaluations, things like that that are handled at that level rather than going off to Chris, the HR director. Someone that could coordinate with meetings and customers and kind of assist with us focusing on our internal customers as well. I know I've mentioned trying to focus on that external customers, but as finance, we support every department in the city. That is our job. So not being available to them because we have FOA requests, for example, that are taking some extreme staff time. I think you've heard that from at least one department tonight and maybe others in the past. I'll give an example. Last week, of the 4 requests that we got, just one of those had an estimated staff completion time of 20 hours. You can imagine that trying to find 20 hours from a staff that's already handling all of those numbers that I mentioned before, that workload, trying to find those 20 hours to complete those in the time that we should is, I don't want to say impossible, but near to. We don't have, a lot of the staff is hourly. We have union staff. You can't make them work overtime, nor would we want to. So a lot of those things are handled by the salary staff who were here till 6, 9 o'clock at night, trying to make sure that we're completing these things in a timely fashion, because that's another one of our goals, making sure that we're providing accurate and timely information. I talked a lot more than I ever like to talk in front of a room of people, so, but does anybody have any questions?
Comment or questions from the council? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to move back over there because I'm more comfortable over there, if that's okay.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, council. We're going to move into, we doing revenue next? Is that where you're at? Or, oh no, let's do fringe. Yeah, we'll We'll move into the fringe. Kelsey, can you just direct them where that is on their page?
So, right behind this page. Oh, okay. So I believe in the financial, I did have some staff help me with this. I was out for a few days, and sorry, I'm also sniffling just like the chief, although I didn't catch it from him. That first green financial services tab, behind our presentation, you should also see that master list that has fringe. If you don't, or if it's in a different spot for you, right behind your color-coded index, is the master list, and that fringe and benefits is listed in that master list as well. So it's in two places in your book. So either behind this index under the master list, fringe and benefits, or in the back of the green financial services tab. Yep, so Phil just dropped off a sheet that should replace one that was in your book. So we had put a guesstimate for school, just because they have just presented their information to the school committee. So we're still working on some school numbers, but the one that Phil just provided you is a little bit closer to where they've said they think they'll land.
So council, for tonight, those of you who had your books and we didn't have them to put the sheets in, if you don't have them in the tabs, you can just leave your book. Kelsey will go through, make sure those are all put together in order so that when we have you turn to a tab, it's the same tab as everybody else as we work through. So go ahead and leave your books here and we'll work on that. Items that we want to get through tonight. What we want to start talking about is there's a few other departments that aren't really departments, but they're broken out into your budget that way. So there's no department director that will come in and present on that. That's really the finance department that will talk about revenues, talk about the fringe benefit section of your budget. And so we're going to walk through that so we have a good handle on those items. And then there's some other expenses that we'll talk about that also don't hit a department, but it might be debt service, right? So those are some of the other expenses that we'll cover tonight. When we complete this, you will have had a presentation from all the departments, and we'll have gone over all the line items that are in your budget book. And so we'll walk through those. Kelsey, do you have a chart?
I just wanted to say for anybody who's following at home, all of this information is available on that budget portal, so they can see everything that we're looking at. Like I said, that portal is a live update to what we've entered, so anything is there.
So which one do you want to go to first? Yep. Can you just direct them on what page that is? Okay. All right, so everybody has their fringe line item sheet? I don't think I have it. It's already in here? Yeah. I think you kept my sheets. Thanks. All right, so it should say workers' comp on the top. It's page 21. Yep, and then it says fringe under it, which is account code 1017.
Yep, so it's in your master list, page 21, or in the financial services tab in the back.
Everybody there? Okay, so in our fringe benefits, this is where our health insurance, FICA, Medicare, MSRS is Maine State Retirement, then ICMA Retirement. There's a recent change in the name. We haven't changed it, but it's they changed it to Mission Square, but it was the former ICMA retirement plan. Employees have an option when they enroll whether or not to opt into Maine State Retirement. They opt out. This is the 401 offer that's available. So this is that benefit component. We have the city pension. So prior to former Maine State Retirement and other plans, we had a city pension plan. I'm getting some updates on this. I believe this will be the year that we no longer actually have any. So when you get the city manager's recommendation, you'll see that as 0. So whoever was receiving that has passed, and so there's no longer any obligation under city pension. So that'll come out as we move forward. We have a cafeteria plan. Though that plan is run through HR. That's part of our health and wellness program. Also offsets medical expenses. Most of this is within every collective bargaining unit that we have in the city. Is captured in there. That next line item is no longer, we were able to negotiate that out from a fire budget a couple years ago, so that's no longer in there. However, when you look at previous years, the reason why that line item is still there, because if we were to expand this out and look at previous years, you'd see that, and so we want to make sure that column is still captured for history's sake. We have an HRA account. We had, so we budget the full package amount, and this is out-of-pocket dollars. That's with our health insurance. When we moved from one of the health insurance plans to the PPO 500 several years ago, in part of negotiating with the collective bargaining units to move to the PPO 500 plan that's offered through the Maine Health Trust insurance program, we created the health reimbursement account, that HRA. And even though we budget that $450,000, this isn't everybody gets it. This is if it's used, it offsets. So we will carry over those funds from year to year. When the year closes out, we'll carry over that. So the actual budget amount would most likely come down, but we put the full amount in the initial phase within the budget process. So we always budget whatever the full payment would be if everyone used their HRA, which is unlikely. Where you're seeing the 199, that's mostly where we land. But we certainly saw some changes, especially during COVID, because people just weren't able to get, or they postponed medical services. And so we did see a shift in that line item at that time. We do carry over funds for unemployment. You'll see where we don't always use that line item. It depends on what takes place. So that's really just a placeholder. We try to look at historical data. We have had someone that was on that for quite some time through a separation that we had. But as you can see in FY23, that was a small amount that was actually paid out. And then our salary reserve account. Our salary reserve account is there for negotiating open collective bargaining units. And so we put amount in there that we will negotiate. Again, when we get to the city manager recommendation, you'll probably see a shift in that because I'll actually spend some time taking a look at all of our open collective bargaining units, try to determine where we will come. And so the manager's request most likely will change. I think an important number to probably look at is our health insurance, where I really believe the work that we do with our wellness program, our health savings accounts, those help us when it comes to where our premiums are landing through the Maine Health Trust for health insurance. And so you see we're not anticipating an increase. We're actually seeing a decrease in our health insurance for this upcoming year. Questions on fringe?
Yeah, just a question on the health insurance. I noticed, I realize the school budget isn't our purview, but I was watching the budget deliberations for the school department, and if my recollection is right, they were showing a 16% increase in health insurance. Council Platts might know. That seems like a big deviation.
Yeah, we're on a completely separate, we're part of the Maine Health Trust. They're part of the Maine School. I'll get the information on where they get their health
Okay,
insurance
so
from.
they're on a
So,
different plan,
different plan.
and so the pool they're in has a different experience, thus
That's right.
they have a different
Yep.
year-over-year
That's right.
pricing. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
We also have discounts available in our plan for people who are non-smokers and things like that. So people who take part in the health and wellness program. So we keep track of whether or not people are involved in that. So this is based closer on actuals because we have several people who are part of those plans that get those discounted amounts off of the initial health insurance amount as well.
Questions on
Any
Fringe?
other questions, but Council Platt?
One question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might have missed this, but with reference to the HRA,
Yes.
so if you budget for 450, you spend 200, whatever it is, where does the unused 250 end up? Does it just not get spent, or does it go to a excess fund or to the general,
Yep, great
general
question. So we will
reserves?
carry that amount over into that line item, and it will reduce the amount that we actually have in there for that upcoming year.
So possibly fiscal year 24, we'll see a carryover
That's
to
correct.
this request.
Yep.
Okay, I understand.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments from the council? Council Whiting?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. You probably mentioned this, Phil, but I missed the Maine PERS, the big jump in Maine State Retirement.
Yeah, so a couple things driving that number. One, an opportunity for people to, we've had a change in new people coming in. So we've had employees that have left that were off the plan. New employees coming in have gone on to that plan. And so, so that's where part of that shift is. Our contribution to Maine State Retirement hasn't changed. It has over the years. It kept going up. The contribution amount remains the same. However, because of a lot of our salary increases with both police and fire, those are significant jumps which impacted this because it's a percentage. Yep.
Other questions or comments from the council?
Our
Great,
Maine
thank
State
you.
Retirement programs vary too, depending on what department you're with. Mostly police and fire are all on a 25-year, 2/3 no age program. Others are on an age program, so at age 60. So, yeah. On that same page, workers' comp, you'll see just this is our number that we get for workers' comp. It's what we've put in here. You'll see it's just a small variation. The council had appropriated funds previously for workers' comp. That's in there. We are working through some of the settlements that we were looking at. We're feeling pretty comfortable with this amount moving forward in this year, a budget, based on that addition that was provided.
Council Mills?
Yes, Mr. Manager, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What percentage of their wages do we pay to the Maine PERS for police, firefighter, that
It
sort of thing?
Depends on the unit. So Kelsey might be able to rattle them off.
Well, I can say right offhand, the non-union is 10.2% for Maine PERS.
To Maine PERS,
That's
okay.
non-union staff. And then we have 5 different unions that are all different
7.
percentages.
So,
I'm not
I-
looking for like specifics,
Police
I'm
is
just
probably
curious.
closer to 12 and some change because they are on a
Yeah.
25 2/3 program. So
Right.
that percentage increase is different. But the other ones, yeah, they're in that ballpark.
And does the union member have a contributory?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So they're in essence paying 20 per, there's between the 10% or 12%, plus they're paying 12?
But they're matching.
Whatever, that's matched then, okay. And then what do we do for the 401K equivalent?
No, that also varies depending on position. It's anywhere between, I think, 6% and 15%, depending on
And
the
that's
positions.
just, that's our match,
That's
that's
our.
the city's
No, that's our contribution.
right?
Some of it is a
That's a good
a
plan.
match, some of them is a minimum threshold, depending on the contract that we have with the individual. Yeah,
It's
you.
12.8 for police and fire for
Thanks.
Maine PERS.
yeah.
And then plus their contribute,
Plus they contribute.
so that's almost
Correct.
25. Thank you.
Just a
Council Whiting.
brief comment on Maine PERS. I had experience with Maine PERS, and years ago, they actually reduced the contribution of employers and employees in many of the plans. It was very ill-advised. The market was doing great, and we're now paying the price for that. If they just left it stable, I think the average rate was around 6.5%.
Yeah.
And if they just left it at that, left well enough alone, we wouldn't be seeing these higher percentages, which is affecting every municipality that participates.
Yeah, we've seen a 4 to 5% shift within a decade. Those numbers increased. Yeah.
Other questions or comments on comp?
All right. Also on this page is the emergency reserve. That's required for us to have this by charter. So we basically take a percentage from our budget and we make sure we have a salary reserve account in there. There's times when we will come before council, especially if we've had a really difficult winter season. We'll come before council and say, we really need to offset the public works budget because of the winter season. And so we'll transfer some money out of the salary reserve for that. Mostly though, that line item isn't touched. And again, and I guess, Councilor Platts, and this one here, it's just a carryover to the next year.
Questions on the reserve?
Yeah, we'll do fiscal services, and probably the easiest way, there's a few other line items on, if you were to look at your, where can they find this line on this?
So we're moving on to the expenditure sheet, which is in the front of your packets or books behind those colored pages with the rainbow page. My staff is fondly referring to it as. Right behind there is where you'll find the revenue and expense pages.
There's two line items under fiscal services that we didn't cover yet. One of them is debt service. Again, regarding debt service, in FY '25, that debt service amount, where you see the increase as a result of the debt that was taken out in FY '24 is being reflected here in FY '25. The CIP that you'll approve in FY '25, you'll see that in the FY '26 budget. So it's always, the interest is always a year behind when you look at that. So so there's no changing that number. That number is fixed based on the approval of the CIP bond in FY '24. So, and I think we were 13.
13 million last year.
Yeah. So, the other line item on here is the transfer to TIF. You might have some more questions on this. You have I think we're gonna have a special budget meeting on April 8th. What I'd like to do is, there's a couple line items we're gonna get into at that meeting. One is the transfer to TIF. The other one we're gonna talk about a little later is the revenue that we receive from TIF funds. So I wanna be able to break those out for you so you can see what's driving those numbers. So more to come on those two, but I just want to make sure we hit that. After now talking about those line items, you've now had a presentation or conversation about all those line items within that expenditure account. Water and sewer might be one that I believe might have been under facilities, but if we didn't, a lot of what's running that is there is a formula that's used for public safety as it pertains to our fire hydrants. That's what drives that number. We use that formula from the water district based on how many fire hydrants we have in the city. So that's what drives that amount. Can you lead them to revenue? Any questions on those?
quick one. Do we, by by charter or otherwise, do we have like a debt to liquidity ratio like that we have to stay within? Is there any bound to how much debt we're allowed to take on?
Yeah, we can provide that for you when we, at the next workshop, but we're way below our debt ratio. Yep. Okay?
So in that same section, you'll see a page that looks like this. It's the FY25 revenues. It's right after, it should be right after that
What's
page.
the page number?
Says it's detail
6?
page 6.
You want to start this one?
I just wanted to comment that we've talked a lot about trying to budget closer to actuals, and you'll see some of that reflected in here as well. So some of these numbers are based closer on what we have actually received in FY23 and what we expect to receive in FY24.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted, of note, you'll see the personal property reimbursement going down about $101,000. I've spoken with the assessing staff, and they've reviewed everything with the state. This is the number they expect. A lot of personal property, there's not a lot of new personal property, so it's losing value, hence that reduced amount.
Yeah, and that's a change from the state. If anybody has questions, we can certainly get that for you. But the Betty and Betta programs is what really impacts that. Those are reducing amount every year. So you'll continue to see that reduced.
The 101,000 decrease is because that property depreciated in value or because we overestimated what we would take in last year?
No, so it would be a depreciation in combination with those exemptions that Phil just mentioned.
Go ahead, Chris.
You want me to go through each of these?
Just the ones that have a real major change, and then we can answer any questions.
So based on actuals with the excise tax and vehicles, we do expect to be able to increase that line by about $150,000. There's been a lot of newer vehicles coming in rather than older. We do expect that to stay about the same. Our actuals for FY23, there was, I don't know if many of you remember, there was a shortage in used vehicles. There's no longer that issue, so we're kind of balancing that out at this time, but it's still, we expect to see an increase over previous year. We do have a decrease in the aircraft line. That one was budgeted at $20,000 last year. You'll see that the actuals were only around $7,200. While Twitchell Airport did close, and a lot of those customers came over here, so we're budgeting a little closer to where we think we're going to land on that one. State revenue sharing has increased. So that's gone up quite a bit based on the percentage that's coming down from the state. The investment income line, you'll notice that's gone up. It was budgeted around $45,000 last year, but you'll see our actuals in FY23, those rates were favorable for us. So we ended up bringing in quite a bit more than was expected because those rates had changed. Rates are balancing out, but still looking very good for us. So we expect to see an increase in that as well. You'll see in the line for transfer in from ARPA, as many of you know, ARPA is starting to phase out, so that will not be part of this upcoming budget.
I think just a quick note on this. Not every program or expense out of ARPA came into this budget. There were certain projects or programs that did. Those that did, they were reflected in here. But I don't want you to think we only spent $117,000 out of ARPA fund. This was just an item that was offset in the budget from ARPA, and it came into this budget. Moving forward for this year, there won't be nothing in the budget this year reflects an ARPA offset.
Yeah. The rental income from intermodal lease line is down from where it was budgeted last year. There has been a change in that lease, and we may be able to bring that number up. The lease just was brought forward, so I think we may be able to bring it up a little bit, but we still expect to see a decrease. As you'll see, the actuals were only around $18,000 for FY23.
What was the cause of increasing this last year to $75,000? Mr. Labonte just gave us a presentation a week or so ago, increasing this to the $25,000 range.
So the finance director and the previous finance director went through and took a look at actuals and put those in. What you'll see in the manager's request, you're going to see that amount go back. What was anticipated was signed agreements for the intermodal that would have brought it to that number. Those negotiations took a lot longer. They didn't happen. There was a lot of things that had to take place within those to get to where we are. So you're going to see those reflected in the manager's presentation.
Yeah, so this 75,000 anticipated not just this lease that we were briefed on a week or so ago, but the future anticipated increase in activity there that Mr. Labonte's still working on.
Correct. Yep.
That, Council Platt, that answer the question?
Yeah, I had a question. The Ingersoll revenue, is that revenue at Ingersoll, or are those rent/debt payments from Ingersoll to the city?
So that's revenue that comes in from Ingersoll, that comes in and offsets. Part of that had to do with some debt that was done at Ingersoll as a special revenue. Ingersoll is unique. It's not the same as Norway Savings Bank, the way that we had it set up. So part of that revenue comes back into the city. So. Any other questions regarding the general government revenue? The other revenue line items are based on department activities that take place. So the next one would be within the clerk's office. You'll see here it's just a minor change. Some of that has to do with the marijuana license, some commercial license fees that we have within clerks that manages those. The finance department, just a small, we receive money back as an agent for the state when we registered vehicles. That's the money that comes back as an agent. And so based on the registrations, where we are to actual, that has a slight increase. We talked earlier with Glenn's budget regarding CDBG reimbursement for services. That's that 588. That offsets mostly the staff in that department. That's where those funds go towards. And then he also spoke about general assistance. That's the state reimbursement based on the expenditure increase that he proposed.
So the CDBG line reimbursement, is this the piece that's coming out of admin fees on CDBG money, grants, whatever that come in? We're taking an admin fee off the top, and that's those fees in aggregate?
That's correct.
And the GA assistant, this is at the 70%?
It is.
So potentially, if the legislature moves us off the appropriations table, we might gain, round numbers, $125,000 more in revenue there.
That's correct. Yep.
Other questions about these items?
All right, moving on, planning and permitting. Again, these are, most of these are based on someone coming in, applying for or requesting a service as an offset for that fee, whether it be the building, permits for building, or asking for, well, the maps and copies we don't really provide anymore. That's just online, and people can just go on and get most of the things that they need there. The big change here is the fire alarm inspections. That has shifted outside of some of the areas that we're doing because we're moving those fire alarm. We talked about the old electrical building up by the library, moving that system off that goes into the LA 911. There won't be that need to actually inspect those any longer, so that revenue coming out. But I think if you'll notice, that hadn't been done in the previous year, so that had already ended. Yeah, I think that's about it for planning and permitting. Engineering, these are just some of the, I'm sorry, Mayor.
So the fire alarm inspection, we're moving that out into 911. That's still going to be fee-based, and it's revenue that'll go into the 911 account?
No, we're moving it actually out of 911. Right now, we manage the system, and so if somebody wants to come onto the system, then we do the inspection. There's a cost for that. We're no longer managing that system, and it'll be a private company that does that. Engineering, really very minimal change, just putting the permits for street opening probably closer to where we had been in the past, or where engineering is expecting us to be based on projects that they're seeing. Under fire and EMS, big change here is the increase to $235,000 in EMS transport. This is something we monitor pretty closely. You'll see in last year, what we brought in was 1.7. So we're putting it at where our actuals were in FY23. Again, this is something that we continue to monitor. We'll continue to I think the fire chief did a presentation and he spoke about what our actual collection rate is. The number you see here is the actual money that we bring in, not the amount that we bill out. Under police department, on that page 7, most stayed the same there. Just a slight reduction in, when you look at vehicle release, that's a vehicle release, whether it's a non-driver, which means that there was a vehicle tow. There was no driver in that vehicle when they towed it. There's a fee that comes back as far as an impound fee for us having to deal with that. That might be somebody that parked in violation of the parking ban, or is parked somewhere and blocking traffic, or it might be part of what we would call a scoff law, which is they have over a certain amount in unpaid parking tickets, and we'll go ahead and tow that vehicle. When you look at vehicle release driver license, that means that was somebody who might have been operating under suspension or under the influence, and they're in the actual public right away. We'll move those vehicles. As Jason mentioned, as the chief mentioned, we had some fluctuating numbers there with the amount of staff we had and who, if we had a reduction in patrol to actually do traffic stops, that number might vary. So we're just trying to keep it at a more actual. Last year, there was a transfer in from opioid settlement for a PACE program at $60,000. This will be one that will most likely carry over. As you heard the chief say, that only ramped up in March. And so there'll be additional funds in there that'll be able to come transfer over. We'll need to have a conversation about opioid, and we'll give you an update on where we are currently with the opioid funds that come in. This is through a national settlement that took place. Some of that was negotiated with the state on what would be transferred to municipalities. So we'll give you a good overview on that so you have a handle what we currently have and what's coming in.
And Phil, are there restrictions to that opioid? So you'll include that in our conversation?
Yeah, there's some language that I think it's pretty wide. You could, but yeah, there is some language that we have to make sure we hit.
Going to be an ongoing?
That's ongoing for.
How that revenue 60? So it'll be for the next few years coming in.
If
the settlement.
So this isn't showing what we're bringing in for the settlement. This is just showing what was allocated in the budget to offset an expense. This is not showing the funds that are coming in and our schedule of funds.
Yeah, so I think that we'll get a more detailed breakdown from the manager. It's highly variable. About a third of the funds we're going to get over the next 15 or more years all come in the first 3 years, and then it's, some years it's 100,000 and the next year it's 40,000. So we'll have to, when the manager gives us a breakdown, we can see we just started getting the money last year, and between 24 and 25, we'll end up getting about a third of it, and council will have to decide where they want to allocate that to.
And there's
Thank you.
some settlements that are just happening. So that's why it's a moving target. And then some of those now are actually at the state level where negotiations taking place. We've retained an attorney, as well as a lot of municipalities our size, to negotiate with the Attorney General's office at the state to ensure those funds actually make it down to the organizations, municipalities that are delivering the services and having the greatest impact. So our attorney works for us in that capacity, and they'll negotiate a settlement term where the state will have a certain amount that they'll allocate, most likely to education, and then there'll be a component that will go down to municipalities. So, all right. Public Works, this is a ballpark of where we normally receive. You'll see it's $419,000 last year. We might have a year where, depending on the actual project, it might be $380,000, but we keep this pretty close to 400. That's through AvCog and the work that we do with state road assistance. So you see our total municipality amount. Don't look at that total on the right on the change. That's not correct. You'll see what it's doing. It's grabbing what the council will actually approve, and so it's showing a zero in there. So, but you'll see where that increase is. School department, you're going to see here these numbers that we haven't changed those, and so we don't have the actual breakdown from the school yet. When we do, we'll put those in. You'll see on the on that change summary page that I provided you. Let's jump to that. We'll have a conversation there.
That's page 5.
Page 5. Yep.
So it's the sheet that Phil passed out to you when he walked around. Yeah.
So, yeah, change 5. So this one here, the mayor and I met with the superintendent last week, I think it was, just to give a good update on where they're currently at, with the school is at, with their budget works. Councilor Platts is here. He can certainly speak to the work that's underway. The superintendent basically has been saying, she's trying to land around that 5.4, 5. I'll get it for you. In that 5.4 range. I've baked that number in here. The numbers are probably not as accurate as you might be seeing, Councilor Platts, because I don't have those numbers yet. You're still doing the work. Yeah. And so, what I wanted to do was, if it's going to be in that 5.5 range, let's put a number in there that gets us close to that, so you can see how that number's coming in. I think that you'll see that the expense line item, Councilor Platts, for the school, you're going to see that 62 million. That's the number that the school presented. In their number, they have debt service included in that amount. We back that out, so you can see the debt service is out, but the total is still at that $62 million number. Yeah.
And when do we expect to get Council Platts, the school committee has not voted on the budget yet, is that correct? Mr. Manager, when are you expecting to get the number, the gross number, after it passes through the school committee?
So you're going to have myself and the superintendent present at the next meeting. At that meeting, she's going to provide you the numbers of where they're at that time. That provides the council to provide some feedback prior to the actual adoption by the committee. And so we've got a little bit of time in there. I believe their meeting will be the Wednesday after, right? Or is it the same? Is it the first or second week? So their next meeting will be that Wednesday after your meeting on Monday. So any feedback that you're going to provide the superintendent will go back to the school committee.
So in effect, what we're going to see Monday, when the superintendent would be analogous to a departmental request On the city side?
That's correct, yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
city manager's recommendation, I
Yeah.
guess would be a
Yeah,
better.
you'll see that. You'll be able to provide that feedback back to the superintendent. She'll be able to go back to the school committee members. You can share where you would like to see. You have the authority as council to, when that budget is presented back to you, you do have some authority in there with the overall amount. You don't have authority into certain line item matters. That's done at the school committee level. What'll take place is that I'll be presenting the city manager budget on the 1st as well. So we've gone through all the department recommendations. You're going to see some adjustments and changes based on, where I think we're coming in at within the budget and what I believe we can deliver. That's that other piece that I have to manage, as well as we could say we're going to do all these things, but then what do we have the capacity to do in this next fiscal year? And so I'll be looking at that. And so when it comes to certain staff recommendations, I might stagger that time. So the full amount that they've requested is in that department line item. I might say, I think we'll probably bring that position in probably in 7 months. And so that amount might be reduced in there. But I'll talk about all those positions. I need to make sure you're okay when you do the manager's budget, that you've approved that position. And so we'll go through that. What I have for you tonight, because it's been a lot that's come at you with, the majority of our budget is really personnel. I think you've seen that going through. You've seen where we land on this. What I want to do is just give you a summary of the department recommendations for all positions. So you have one working sheet that you can look at, and these are the positions. I don't have the amounts in here. What I'll do is on April 1st, because right now these are department recommendations. If these make it into the city manager recommendations, I'll have a sheet for you that'll be a worksheet of the actual positions that I'm recommending, plus the amounts that I'm recommending. It'll have what a full year is, but then what I'm recommending for this fiscal year. So there's going to be some positions that those departments I'll support and say that should happen July 1. We should be moving forward on that as soon as possible. It might be the full amount. Others, I think we talked about this with Public Works. If we were to move forward with changing out the contract services for painting, right? That's the painting at the crosswalks, turns, all those things, not the line striping, but just the other handwork. If we were to move forward with that, we talked about that, it would only be probably a couple months that we would have those 3 new staff members come in. They would get part of that, but then they would also be working into the winter maintenance program. And then they would be on board, ready to go by spring. That's the goal with that. So let me walk through these for you. The first one is what I just mentioned with Public Works. The other one is the mechanic that the Public Works Director mentioned regarding again, there's a revenue offset here. So when I give my recommendation, I'll provide that revenue offset amount so that you'll know what that revenue and what the actual expense impact will be based on those revenues. Because if my recommendation is to put it in, you say, I want to cut that position, then I need to make sure you know that that's revenue that's coming out as well. So, or a department transfer that has to go back into that other department because of that change. So it'll be just like a bridge document that we can make sure we cover all those other line items. Kelsey talked today about the executive assistant, the senior appraiser position. This was as a result of an FY23 carryover of a position that had not been had not been filled. They had been working at filling that position. We weren't able to bring that position in. Then we had an amount that was available to now actually staff that position up. That's still within this council's purview whether or not we carry that position on moving forward. We'll work that into the budget, though, so that you'll see that. Basically, it's bringing assessing from 3 to 4 is what that will ultimately do. Business and community development, Glenn talked tonight about the general assistance added position. That's this position right here. So the fire chief mentioned the need to have a deputy that's over the fire service, a deputy that's over EMS, that, because what we had prior to is we had a EMS coordinator. That EMS coordinator is now covered under a grant. This position will be reduced based on the amount that was budgeted before. I'll show you that offset in the manager's recommendation. Police, the police chief introduced tonight, the admin assistant, just for especially new counselors to know, that's a position that was in their budget. I think in FY19 is when that was reduced. So this is actually bringing that position back in to be able to, I have admin assistant, that's actually incorrect, it's an information assistant. And so it's bringing that position back in, and then now having a specific task of what was mentioned. I think the chief, one thing he also mentioned was that officers are doing a great deal of that work. If you bring in somebody that could come in as a non-sworn position, reduced pay, obviously, that means that officer's back on the street quicker. So already talked about PACE, talked about the juvenile detective. Planning and permitting, Eric talked about the city planner position, long range, and then the IT position. This has been a ARPA-funded position for the last 2 years. This is the first year that it's coming into the budget. And so this is the software technician to manage a great deal of our software programs. I talked about TIF, what you'll see in that, right now there's a placeholder of 1.5 million that's in there for TIF. That's that revenue offset. I'll break down where within administrative costs those funds go towards. So basically, Jay's budget that he mentioned, that's all in that TIF offset. Economic development's covered in there. There's percentages from other departments that deal directly with economic development, which might be a portion of the director of planning, a position within planning. So we'll work that through so you'll see where that amount is. It may not be the 1.5 right now, that's in there as a placeholder. One thing that hasn't been done in the past, that as I was going through this, and I feel it's important to be able to provide you, is an actual breakdown of that budget so that you can see where that 1.5 goes. Before it was just a line item, and then it came in to help offset the budget. But I think it's good to see exactly where are we talking about this money going and what are we looking for it to be able to do. So those are the things that are coming. In your books, you've had the CIP 5-year plan. I haven't received any comments about changes. It was brought up again at the planning board meeting, their last meeting, to see if solicit any feedback from planning. That's a requirement by the ordinance to present that before the planning board before you adopt the plan. Again, this is the plan. This isn't, you're not, when you have this on your agenda, this will be on the April 1st meeting. When you have this on the agenda to adopt this plan, you're not committing to anything. You're just committing that as a city, we have a conceptual plan on what we will be expending or where the requests, where the needs are anyway, over the next 5 years. The 23 million that's in there for FY25, that won't be the number that you see when I present my budget for FY25. It will be, 10 million less. Knowing that there are some demands there, there's some needs there, that'll be my recommendation. Council, you'll be able to say, hey, I really think this piece of equipment's important. I think we need to put it in. You'll be able to make those changes. And what I'll ask is that as I present it, if there's some things you see in there that you want to change, then we can have that conversation and we can make some of that once I present the actual FY25 CIP. So there'll be recommendations for changes within that. Some of that has to do with staff capacity as well. So there might be a big project in there that I'm not seeing where we have the bandwidth to be able to do that, and so I might push that off for FY26. I think that covered everything that we wanted to make sure we hit. Again, if your books, if you're like, hey, can you make sure this matches everybody else's, just leave it. Kelsey will take it, we'll go through it, make sure everything's in there. And what I'll have for you on April 1st is you'll have updated pages. Part of us going through, when we talked before about, do you want to have the departments present, and we agreed to doing that. So you have the department's request. You're now going to have a column that will have the manager's proposed request on here. For folks that this is new, the mayor and I were talking about this recently within ordinance, so I'll present that to you. You will have a workshop, and we'll have some time to have some more conversation on this on the 8th. If there's some direction that you're heading, that's the time to really have a good conversation with me about it. Because then we can look at, okay, what adjustments do we need to make within that before you actually get to first reading. Once you get to first reading, you will now need to make motions to amend the entire budget. But we can get that to you prior to that second meeting in April when you do the first reading. We can make those changes in there. If, as a group, you have a good consensus on it, we're feeling good with it, we can do that. If we're not getting that, then you might want to leave it and actually do an amendment. But it's going to be important for you to kind of work through and figure, okay, where are we at with, based on the recommendations that I provide you. So, Mayor, I don't know if you have any more to add to that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is that the dates that are, so there's a few dates we need to keep in mind here, right? The first date is May 19th. If we don't have a budget that's approved that includes the school portion by May 19th, we will not be able to get the school budget on the ballot for approval on the June 9th election. A further out date, I guess Councilor Walker and Councilor Geary may remember this, I guess, but the other important date is June 30th, right? By charter, if the council has not enacted a budget come July 1st, the manager's recommended budget will become the city budget. The other thing I guess I would say is that keeping the May 19th date in mind, I think it's a better approach for the council to work the budget and any recommendations the councilors have about things that should be changed in any way, deleted, added to, so that we have a budget that we think we can pass when we get to first reading, and we're not in first and second reading still trying to work the budget. So if we have to push the current schedule that we have along a little further to have more discussion, I think that's probably more fruitful than just sticking to the schedule, going to first reading when we're not all exactly sure where we want to be. So any other thoughts that the council has?
I agree with what you just said. We need a little bit extra time to figure out what we really want in the budget, what we don't want in the budget. And it's a free-for-all at the end if we're throwing amendments and trying to keep track of who said what, when, how.
Yeah, I think that if you get down to first and second reading and we're trying to change the budget, then it's very difficult because as for those of us going through a municipal budget the first time or a governmental budget for the first time, there's a lot of impacts. When you turn the dial one notch to the left, 5 other things get affected. So if we need a little extra time, I think we should take it, work through it, have a robust discussion about what people think about the total number, what they think about if there's changes, what people's recommendations are about services should be cut or services that should be added before we get to the first reading.
What's the date of the first reading?
So your first reading will be April 16th, will be the first reading. What we've provided is the extra workshop on the 8th. And that will be no presentations. You'll have a great opportunity there just to have discussions. The actual manager, even though I'm presenting a budget, a draft budget on the 1st, when you actually go to first reading, that'll be the actual manager's budget. And so any changes that you come up with on the 8th, I can be making those adjustments as, we'll work together on that. I want to make sure we're in alignment the best we can on those things. And so I'll make those recommendations for that. And then as the mayor just said, it's really the school budget that you have to hit on that May 19th date. If you're getting through this and we're not getting to where we need to be, your first reading does not have to happen on that April 16th meeting. You have time. We can push that off. We'll play that by ear. I'm trying to align everything as close as we can, because a lot of times when people vote on the school budget, they want to know, how is this impacting the overall city budget? If we're not there, then it's hard to do that. All you're looking is a number. April 15th is a holiday, so it'll be that Tuesday. Yep. Does that make sense about why we're trying to align that? So that's where you're going to continue to see this sheet, so that you have an idea of, okay, how's this impacting overall? Yeah, and you'll see, and when I do the full presentation, there'll be a budget message that's in there that'll summarize some of the driving costs when it comes to county tax, when it comes to intergovernmental. You've had those presentations. LATC is going to be received anyway, the draft budget, but LATC hasn't approved that budget yet. You know, we have some built-in revenue that when we moved the LATC budget last year, there was a carryover. I felt there was an increase coming. We had already budgeted a certain amount. So I said, let that ride and help us probably offset what I knew was going to be coming from WMTS. So our impact is actually going to be less than what the actual amount is, because we have that previous year's revenue that I withhold plus this year's revenue that we know is coming in under. Those two amounts will reduce that amount, but I can tell you what you're going to be looking at. You can add about $200,000 on top of what we're recommending that'll come up in FY26. That gives us, there's a one-year extension on the WMTS grant. That gives us time to really take a look and say, what are we going to do when it comes to transit, and what does that look like for us?
The general purpose aid to education, general revenue sharing numbers are estimates, because we don't have a final number from the state yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, the superintendent works that through pretty closely with the state. So that number tends to fluctuate right up until, and she probably might have shared this already, they try to get a pretty close number on that, but they have seen that change, and then they'll come back and say, we have this much more in revenue. And so you might see an adjustment on your first reading.
Right. So what's in here now is would it be fair to say, a conservative estimate for those numbers?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, I took where she said that she was with her expenses, and then I added a revenue line item that gets me at 5.4%. So that's how I work that in currently. I don't have that breakdown at this point. Yeah, and we know where for the city side, where we're coming in. We estimate for the state revenue share. I don't put the full amount in because we don't always hit it. And so we try to be really conservative there. That's an area that can get a lot of municipalities jammed up, because we're talking $6.5 million that comes in through that state revenue share. You want to make sure you're pretty close to where you're estimating. So I'm not putting in, the closer to 7 million and some change, I think, that the state's estimating, because the state takes and says, okay, we're going to see this much tourist attraction, we're going to see this much growth, and we try to come in as close as we can to where we think we were last year, and then we let each of those years build off from that, depending on what's taking place within the economy within the state. So those are all moving numbers that we try to be as conservative as we can. But then one thing that Kelsey said is we did make some changes, because if we're always coming in we're always coming in way over in that budget, what we've done is we've passed on an unjust or undue tax burden onto the taxpayers. We don't want to do that either. We want to make sure we're finding a good balance in that. And so we'll do our best to come up as conservatively as we can.
Other questions?
Not a
Council
question,
Collins?
just a comment, to follow up. I applaud the effort to do that. That's fantastic. The real numbers are where we should be, so thank
Yeah.
you for the efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to state that I agree with Councilor Gary and your statement as well, Mr. Mayor, giving us enough time, because that was going to be my question is, if we're only going to have, once we get through all these different departments, you know, giving us only one workshop to do it is certainly, for me, not enough. I would rather have as many as we can so that we can sit down before we get, and I concur, so that we're not in on the 11th hour and we're really going down to brass tacks about it. If we have to go more workshops, I'm totally in favor of that, so we can really get down to the numbers, the nitty gritty about it, and really go through it of how it's going to affect either way if we decide to cut something or however we do it. So
I'm trying not to put anything else on your workshops but budget, so you'll see that on the 1st. You'll get that again on the even the night that you have the first reading will be budget. So you'll continue to have that conversation plus the 8th. So you really have 3 more workshops. Now the school will be presenting some numbers on the 1st, as well as I'll be presenting some numbers. But you'll still have some. You'll have some time on the 1st to launch into those discussions. So.
Great. Anything else? Mr. Manager, anything else
All
tonight?
set. I think you have everything that we were hoping to make sure we covered. So.
Great. Thanks very much. We'll adjourn the work session.